Uh, Welcome everybody. I was hoping to get a good crowd. We just got, I think, 3 more people have just entered the waiting room. Mark Hart is my co-host and co-anchor and everything else, and does all the chief cook, bottle washer, seminar, and IT guru that looks after things. And he will be posting the video and all of the chat and all of the documentation that goes to support this session into the OC Callers website, as he does every week. So if you aren't able to stick around at past 10 o'clock my time, or for the hour or the discussion afterwards, you can always catch the highlights and get the download of all the information off the OC Callers website. Welcome to everybody today. One of the questions that has come up, or one of the topics of discussion that has come up recently and very vehemently, is of course the SSD program, or the Social Square Dance program. I would like to qualify right now that while I'm giving the presentation, I've got the presentation up on my screen. I cannot see your faces or any of the people in there. So if you're raising your hand or putting a hand up flag to make a comment, I can't see it. Put it in the chat or just unmute yourself if it's relevant to that particular moment. Just jump right in and ask the question. I do encourage social discussion on this, but please don't get offended if I don't jump at you and you're sitting there with your hand up, because I cannot see you. Okay, what we're looking at is social square dancing, and we want to take a closer look at it because there's still a lot of things about it that people don't understand, things that people do understand, or things that people intentionally misunderstand. So with that in mind, I want to start with Color Lab. Color Lab made the policy statement in 2021 about what social square dancing is, and I've copied the policy statement here. Okay, it's an social square dancing, previously known as sustainable square dancing, is an alternate entry-level destination dance program intended for use without requiring any change to any other dance program. SSD is a fun yet meaningful dance program. Beginners can learn it, standard application, in 18 to 22 hours. Dancers are encouraged to dance that program and to recruit to their friends with no pressure to move up to higher programs. SSD is a shorter, easier entry program to make square dancing more marketable to new dancers. My opinion is that statement is very well intended, and it is also very critically flawed. And like I said, this is my opinion. I mentioned this when we were discussing this, and a lot of people agreed with it, but it still went in. And those problems I have are 5 keynotes within that policy statement. First is an alternate entry-level destination program. What is an entry-level destination program other than contradictory? A different entry level and a destination program doesn't work together. This is an argument that's been made many times, but realistically, it's not a bad statement. It says you can get somebody that doesn't dance into square dancing, and they don't have to go any further. They can just enjoy dancing there. It is a program in itself. Basic is a complete program. Basic is a destination. Mainstream is a complete program. Mainstream is not a complete program. You need basic, then you need mainstream. Mainstream is a destination program. Every program is a destination program in that aspect. The difference with SSD is it has no precursors. SSD and basic are exactly the same, not in movements, but in what they are as scope for the dancing. It's with that, it says it doesn't require any changes. Well, neither does the basic program require any changes to the dance program, and no other dance program require changes if you dance basic. It's designed to set the foundation for all the other dance programs. SSD is not designed that way. SSD is designed to stand by itself. The problem that we have with basic program is there are very few callers call it, or for that matter, even know how to use the basic program as a standalone. And there's very little support for basic dancing in the community. So the first statement, it's basically just, this is a fancy way of saying it's an easy way to start square dancing and enjoy it as a whole program all by itself. The second one, SSD is a fun yet meaningful dance program. Okay, that's a statement that's true. it's also somewhat offensive to callers and dancers of all the other programs by implying that they are not fun nor meaningful programs. I don't think that was the intent, but unfortunately, because of the mindset, that's the way a lot of callers took it. Unfortunately, in my opinion, it is relatively true. Although square dancing is supposed to be fun and social at every level, in many areas the definition of fun and sociability have become so skewed to mean an elitist mentality of defining programs as the fun level. Hurry up and get here so that we can all dance together. I can't wait till you start dancing plus. That's the fun level. I've heard that so many times, and it sickens me. Every level should be fun. Every program should be fun. And if it's not, then you're not doing your jobs as callers. And the focus has become the goal as a stepping stone, as opposed to enjoying the journey and taking your time to see all those little tourist traps along the way. Right now there's the super highway. You get on the freeway and you drive and you're looking at concrete and walls, as opposed to Route 66 with all the little tourist traps along the way. That's what square dancing is supposed to be. That journey of getting to where you want to get to. Enjoy your vacation when you get there, but all the little stops along the way to enjoy it. The third one, beginners can learn it in 18 to 22 hours. Is that a yes they can or a no they can't? Well, beginners can learn pretty much anything in a focused, fixed environment. But to me, this statement would be better made as it's a program that's designed to teach easy standard applications of 50 square dance movements in 18 to 22 hours, which gives the dancers a full and danceable program from which to enjoy and build their dancing experience. Okay? The ability to teach a rush program has already been ingrained in too many callers. Many areas teach beginners to graduated plus dancers in as little as 20 to 30 weeks or 30 to 45 hours of instruction. And what's that got us? The rush to plus, lower dancing. Other than dancers coming up and learning, everyone including the existing dancers now say the new norm is they can't dance the way they used to. And it's a rushed escalator designed to cull the poor dancers and keep those elite until they're too old to care anymore, or they just simply die off. Did somebody have a comment there?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Go ahead.
18 to 22 hours does not necessarily equal 12 weeks.
I agree.
If you're running a 2-hour class, it's different than you're running an hour and a half class, which I see a lot of.
I understand that completely. That's why I put bracket 12 weeks in there, because for some people they may have 1 hour a night and then we're taking 22 weeks. For some people they may have 3 or 4 hours a night and they're doing less time. That's just the generation is 18 to 22 hours, and that's based on a minimum of an hour and a half a week in that area. The average is 12 weeks. That's where it balances out, and that's going to vary from place to place to place. That's just an average that was put down there for the point of discussion.
Mel?
We can't say 12 weeks because is your 12 weeks 1 hour, or is it 2.5? Is it 3 hours? Somebody else had a question or a comment?
It's Wendy from Ottawa.
Yes, Wendy.
My understanding was it wasn't 12 weeks, but 12 lessons.
That's correct.
Whether you do that in 12 weeks or 14 weeks or 16 weeks or 20 weeks, it's the equivalent of 12 lessons, 2 hours.
And this is why I put that in there, because this is the Collar Lab policy statement. Can learn it in 18 to 22 hours. That's teaching time. And that stems back from the old Collar Teacher Manual and the old Collar Lab Basic Mainstream program, because when the combination of Basic and Mainstream went from 2 years to 1 year, it wasn't designed to be taught in so many weeks. It was designed to be taught in 84 or 86 hours of instruction time, whatever your program structure is. So that's why I said bracket 12 weeks when it says 18 to 22 hours. That's the recommended 12 lessons. And that's usually over a 12-week period. That's why that is. The reality is it's a rushed escalator that we're on, and in my opinion, this is still a bit of a rushed escalator, but I'll come to that in a bit. The fourth point is dancers are encouraged to are encouraged to dance the program, recruit to the friends, and there's no pressure to move up. This is an idealistic goal that will work only with dedication to the program and to the dancers. Unfortunately, many clubs are using SSD as a kickstart to refill their clubs, and even have combined nights of SSD mainstream or SSD plus because there's no basic or mainstream clubs locally. This says to the dancer, here's your SSD program. There's no pressure to move up. We want you to do this. We're going to teach you this and stick around, or we're going to combine the evening tip for tip. So stick around and watch the others dance all the stuff that you can't do. By the way, we're going to teach you this stuff too eventually. Well, what's really changed other than we're fast tracking them to move on the floor and then rushing them up the escalator? Yeah. If you were here as part of the earlier discussion, I was talking with Larry. They've got 12 SSD only clubs in their area. They've got SSD dances. That is something that will actually work in a specific area, and it works really well. But mixing and matching this doesn't work, and I'll get back into that in a bit. The fifth point is SSD is a shorter entry program to make square dancing more marketable to new dancers. This is in fact a true statement. Just as Basic was an easy entry program to make it more marketable, the Community Dance program was an easy entry level to make an introduction to square dancing more marketable. Club 50 was an easier program to make it more marketable, and the variations of that, which were regional, were just that, to make it more marketable. The program is not where the problem lies. The problem is the will and the strength of callers to actually commit to a program, and of the square dance community as a whole to stop fighting against the intent of what the SSD program is supposed to be. It's a complete standalone program, not an alternate entry designed to give the dancers a fast track. It's designed to give the dancers a commonality of movements and application of those movements in a fun and social setting that they can go and dance and enjoy. SSD is not and will not be a destination program until such time as it's recognized as a destination with things to do when the destination is reached. And in other words, that means SSD dances, SSD clubs, SSD halls at festivals, and all that other stuff. And some areas are doing this. A lot right now are not. So, as to marketing the SSD, and I want to talk about this for just a little bit, SSD could be an easy program to market, except there's no real marketing strategy that I'm familiar with that's been done with the SSD program. There's 5 simple rules of marketing in general, and they have not, other than by, again, specific individuals, really been met. The first one is Rule 1. Make yourself known. Outside of the square dance community, SSD really has no visible presence in general, and it's not known as that. It's just known as square dancing. And that's not a bad thing, but it's not necessarily a good thing until we change our whole collective mindset. It's being marketed right now as, quite frankly, the same old tired platform that we market square dancing in general. We're just not telling them the rest of the story. Rule 2, take the competition seriously. Well, guess what, guys? The competition is not all the other activities like bowling, darts, and television, and all the rest of that stuff. If the product is worth having and doing, users will use it, they'll find the time, and they'll make the time. It's a choice. We've got to sell a product that they want to have. The real competition is us as callers and all the other existing square dance programs. If SSD is going to be viable, it must compete with every other square dance program, with every other square dance, and with every other square dance activity that's out there. We don't have to believe that square dancing is worth doing it. That's easy. We wouldn't be here if we didn't. We got to get the public opinion to go where they want to go, and where we want them to want to go is to SSD. And we must change the current square dance community opinion that, quite frankly, you're not better than us just because you dance plus or advanced or challenge or mainstream or basic. You're a square dancer. We're square dancers too. Rule 3, relate to your audience. You must overcome the expertise perception and get the message across to every experience level. In other words, drop all the square dance jargon in marketing. If we continue to cater to only one segment of a potential audience, we limit our chance to turn this product into a success. And that's what we do. We are catering to a closed audience, and we're marketing to closed audiences. I'll get into a bit of that a little later. Rule 4 is we've got to progress at the speed of the audience. This goes into the timing. We must understand the speed of the audience, in other words, our dancers, and operate at their level. This is not the teaching and learning, which is simple. This is finding the speeds appropriate to multiple targets and applying that hectic marketing to that audience. This is all about marketing. This isn't about learning to dance. If you move quickly with the sales pitch, the message is lost. If you move too slow, it's off-putting and drags out. Okay? It's all about relationship building and maintaining that relationship before, during, and after they become square dancing. It's got nothing to do with learning to dance. It's got to do with marketing the idea and getting the sale. Getting them in the door is the hard part. Getting them on the floor is the easy part. Having fun is even easier if you know what you're doing. And rule 5 is make the customers happy. There's a big argument that said the customer is not always right. Well, in marketing terms, the customer is always right. Don't write off that rule of marketing. You've got to sell a product, but that product must always exceed the expectations. SSD has a lot of potential, but if you can't do it, you can't sell it. If you can't make it a product that they want to buy and make the time to make it part of their lives, don't market it, because all you're going to do is set yourself up and set the dancers up for disappointment. Okay? If you can't do it, then go back and learn the product before you attempt to even sell it. Now that's the objective analysis of the policy statement. Again, it's done, my opinion, of the SSD program. And it's got a lot of potential. The idea is very sound. But let's face it, square dancing is dying. And unless we fully commit to doing something, the activity likely has less than 30 more years to live. Like any new idea, the participants have to want to change. They must support, they must accept change, and they must sell the why participate in SSD over all the other options that are available. And unless we can collectively come to a mindset, that's not going to happen. Okay, so let's look at the program itself. Before we look at the individual movements, it's necessary to look at the program concept and the reason behind it. This is described in the SSD lesson plan documents and all that are provided on the Color Lab website, and I provided copies of those to Mark so that he can post them up on the website so you don't have to look through the Color Lab knowledge base if you're not comfortable with that platform. The philosophy itself says it is a 50-call dancing destination, not an entry level. This is where they contradict themselves. At least the designers of the program recognize that as a fact, even if the Color Lab policy statement differs from it. The success of SSD has one single fact tied to it. Get the dancers into real dance mode sooner. That's the objective. Well, that's the objective of all the programs, but that's the objective of the basic, but that's also the objective of SSD. I'm honestly not sure what to make of that statement. When I was teaching classes, my dancers were in dance mode from the very first record that I put on the turntable. You know, what they go on to do in the program statement is to clarify that SSD has a shorter teaching time that can allow for 2 to 3 classes per year, more dancers, and a higher retention rate. That is a great concept, but it's only a great concept if you have a venue for 2 to 3 classes per year, and those classes get the same amount of time of activity to learn. You can't teach one and give them 3 hours a night in 12 weeks, and then the next class you give them an hour and a half each, and then the next class you cut it down again. You can't have one venue one night for 2 hours and expect to teach 3 full classes in a year if you have each class repeat, because you're consecutively cutting down the time. And that's why, as I mentioned Larry, and I'm going to refer back to him a number of times, in his area, they have their classes going. They've got 11 clubs going, another one starting up. If they can't make it to their club, they recommend going others, and they share the load and they go down, and they've got groupings together where they have SSD dances for full-blown SSD dancers that are not teaching classes, because not everybody wants to go back and angel a class 3 or 4 times in a row. They want to actually get out there and use what they can. So they create all those things. Friends bring friends, and friends dance with friends. That's a simple fact. It's true to all successful activities and programs, whether square dancing or not. If you enjoy the activity, you bring your friends and you try to share it with them. You don't force it on them, but if they enjoy it, they'll stay. If not, you can still be friends. You know, it's like any other activity. But recruiting, I don't care how good you are, all the advertisement, all the papers, all the television commercials and everything else, that's about 1% or less of the people that come in the door. It's dancers bring in dancers. And unless you can get them to do that at every level from 6 to 96, it's not going to work. So the program has to meet those expectations. The SSD program provides a vehicle for teaching quickly, but it also provides regular SSD graduate dancers to go somewhere without learning new calls. That's all in the statement. This implies that graduate dancers want to learn and relearn and retake. It's an implication that's not true. For it to work, there has to be destination activities for SSD. There has to be a place for them to go and use what they've learned. It also needs to be separate from the, and I mean fully separate from the mainstream plus or advanced classes and the club dancing that's on the same night. Otherwise, it's not going to work. You're just saying, here's what you've learned and here's all the stuff you're not allowed to do. So, SSD is great, but this is greater. Come and dance with us. That's the wrong impression. It uses standard applications. Standard applications, we were having this discussion earlier, are very misunderstood application of square dancing. What is a standard in one place is different in another place, but that's not what standard applications are. It's not what's normal in your area. Standard applications is a defined application of common ground for each movement, which is meant to say this is the lowest common minimum denominator that a caller from anywhere in the world can go and expect that any dancer that's at that program should be able to dance that movement. That's what the standard application. It's designed to say, here's a baseline to work from. The SSD program is designed to use the context of the published standard applications as a base, but it's not restricted solely to those programs. It's designed with applications listed and assumed that they can be danced smoothly by all dancers who dance SSD. Exactly the same as basic, exactly the same as mainstream, exactly the same as plus. Every level has standard applications with that exact same codicil. And because it's a Color Lab program, the definitions, the rules, the guidelines, the standard applications are exactly the same in the program. It's nothing new. SSD does not reject standard application variation or extended applications. There's a lot of controversy saying, oh, it's plain vanilla, you can't do anything different. You can't call a swing through, or you can't do a boy-boy, girl-girl, do-si-do, or four-girls square through. I don't know who's saying that because it's not true. Its intent is to ensure that dancers get a well-presented, smooth-flowing, and well-timed choreographic experience that uses familiar formations and arrangements with a very high chance of success. That's what SSD is designed for. In simple terms, SSD is trying to say, callers, focus on the dancer's comfort and the dancer's experience. Give them enjoyment. Use the provided material to give variety and a dancing experience that's enjoyable to them. It's about them having fun and success, not about a caller showing how clever he or she can be with choreography. And basically it says, if you can't call an interesting and fun dance from normal and familiar, then you need to go back and relearn how to call. If you want to use extended applications, use good judgment. It's perfectly acceptable in SSD, but use good judgment. A little goes a long way, but focus on the foundations first and always. Personally, I think that's good advice for callers everywhere at every program. But that simple edict seems to have been lost in the quest for the clever caller choreography rather than the clever dancer success with interesting use of known choreography. Cal Campbell puts it very, very simply for every square dance program. Different, not difficult. Simple statement that really clarifies it.
Hey, Mel, can I add on to that?
Absolutely.
Slightly? This is Kurt. The way I interpret it is that, as usual, you can always, you use your judgment to interject extended applications as appropriate, but anything you do is going to take some amount of time, and that time could alternatively be used for teaching and or strengthening their experience of the standard applications. And I think the reason it's mentioned as part of the whole philosophy of SSD is that one of the ways you get away with teaching this amount of material in a smaller amount of time is by not taking the time to go too far down any branch of extended applications. focus on the
that is absolutely correct, and it's a good succinct way of looking at it. The standard applications does not mean boring one way only. There's a lot of variety available to you, and what it says is you want to dance the standard applications first. Then there's the standard application variations, such as left square through, or four girls square through, or a boy boy girl girl do si do, which are perfectly acceptable. And then there's extended applications. And when you get into those, you should have done all of the standard applications first, and then those things are introduced slowly after the fact. And it's a very, very good way that you put that, Kurt.
Yeah, Mel.
Yes.
Jerry Story said, doesn't he rest in peace, when we were talking back at caller school and stuff, and he was teaching and all. He says we should have, it wasn't the SSD at the time, he said, but we should have our mainstream class as a 2-year course. And revolves that you take the first year, you do not go into plus or advance or anything else until after you have 2 years of dancing of mainstream, so you can learn the calls in different ways. And have it taught that way. At
that used
time,
to be the normal standard.
And it was a good point.
Yeah. It's part of the rush, and it's part of the dwindling numbers that created that. We want full halls rather than happy dancers, and we want callers to impress other callers rather than callers to impress dancers. And that's a generic derogatory statement. It's provocative, and it's not true of all callers. In fact, most callers aren't like that. There's too many that are. I'm going to be coming into a little bit of that, but you're absolutely correct. 2 years graduated mainstream used to be pretty much the requirement before even considering to be taught plus, and you got permission from your caller first. But those days are long gone, so let's not go back into the old days. That's what we need to do. What we need to do is say, you know what? It's called history for a reason, and it's called the future for a reason. We learn from history, but let's focus on the future. Okay, I want to look at the SSD movements or the calls, because this is where a lot of confusion comes in. The list itself is well published, and the documents and lists are available on the Caller Lab website. They're going to be available on the OC Callers website after this presentation is done. The program is essentially the existing basic and mainstream program from standard application positions and formations. And yes, both, they can vary with the following movement, without the following movements. The 14 movements, without the following. So that's 14 movements and the quarter tag and 3/4 tag out of the tag to line family. Okay, the reality is the list is confusing for a lot of callers. The dancers don't care about the list. If the dancers are having fun, they don't care what's on the list. Okay, program status is a taught fallacy that callers and elitist dancers have created. Okay? And we do have a lot of elitist program status fallacy dancers. Square dancers that are true square dancers, they just want to go and be able to dance what is called to them. And if the program advertises basic, they know that any movement on the basic program, they should be able to dance from a standard application. If it's mainstream, if it's SSD, if it's advanced 1 or advanced 2, they know that looking at that on the flyer says, A1, I should be able to dance everything from high, I'm a square dancer, circle left, to the last movement on the A1 program. Nothing off A2. Can't do a facing couples recycle because that's not on the A1 list. That's what they want. They want to be able to dance successfully. If they're searching for something else, that's because callers are not delivering what they've been marketing. And that is fun, sociable, and entertainment in an activity using the medium of square dancing. Social is probably one of the silliest and stupid misnomers that they put on this activity for SSD. It's better, it's a silly misnomer. It's better because no one would want to attend any recreational activity or any recreational group activity that is antisocial and not fun or entertaining, would they? But we have to clarify social square dancing. Why? Because sustainability says, we're dying and we didn't want to face that reality. Yes, it is a social activity. Dancing is a social activity. Square dancing is a social activity. But we're marketing it saying, By doing that, we're saying that all the other ones aren't. That's not the intent. And it's the wrong way of focus. Unfortunately, it is the way a lot of dancers come up that way, or a lot of callers look at it. What, you're saying we're not good enough? Okay, so with the movements themselves, there's 14 and a half movements that are not on the list. Do passo, seesaw, walk around your corner, the thar family, shoot the star, slip the clutch, 1/4 and 3/4 tag, not the formations, but the actual movements, cloverleaf, Dixie style, 8 chain through, or the family, pass to the center, spin chain through, spin the top, turn through, and walk and dodge. That's it. Everything else in the basic and mainstream program is on the list. And I think this goes into answering Julianne. I think you had a question or comment earlier. Is the SSD program just, a revisitation of the basic list? No, it's not. It's a combination of both, less 14 and a half movements. And if you cannot call a dance without those 14 movements, well, something's wrong. You need to go back. What this gives you, in my opinion, is a very full square dance program of 50 movements with a lot of potential variety. However, I personally feel that this is still somewhat rushed and designed to force new dancers to learn every week for 12 weeks. Somebody very succinctly said it's designed to be taught in 12 lessons. That doesn't mean 12 weeks. Jerry said he likes 16 weeks, but usually 14 weeks, because that allows a few weeks in there that you can actually dance and enjoy the program while you're learning. Okay? I personally feel it's rushed. The concept is good, but it'll only work if they have a place to master it and practice and enjoy that rush through the movements. Okay? And you look at this, lesson 1, it's a full program, but there's not really a lot in there. That's just your big circle work and a lot of stuff to get you moving and flow and feel like your dancer. Lesson 2, star through and slide through are on the same program. So is half sachet, so is ladies in men's sachet, so is rollaway. Again, we haven't really done anything new. And as we go through the list, it's logically progressive, but a lot of callers have a problem because right and left, we do a wheel around, we do a courtesy turn, we do a pass through, we do arm turns, but we don't do a right and left through until the sixth lesson in the program. And they can't do it without right and left through, so they shift the program. Well, then you're not doing the SSD program. You're modifying it for your own use and your own things. The idea is if you dance SSD 5 and I go to Bob Elling's SSD group and they're on SSD 5, I can expect not to have right and left through called for me unless it's taught, unless that's going to be they're starting SSD 6. The problem I have with it is the last 2 sessions, box the nat, hinge, touch a quarter, the circulates, tag the line, half tag, and then the last lesson, circulate, split circulate, box circulate, fold, cross fold, scoot back, and recycle. I wouldn't even teach all that in one night, standard position or standard application in a full mainstream program. It's very good built up to there, but there's still some flaws and whatnot, which is why I say it is still a very rushed program, especially towards the end. And I look at that, you're going to have to make your own judgments. It does work for some, it doesn't work for others. And it's such a mixed bag, but as I said earlier, until we're 5 years into applying this where we can get some good data and stats and the revisions, we're not going to really know for sure. This is what a lot of people were asking about, the pros and the cons. One of the biggest pro is the progression is fixed, and I gotta admit it, the progression is actually quite logical. Okay? It means it's structured and formatted so that an SSD 7 group can go anywhere and dance with another SSD 7 group. SSD 7 means SSD less than 7 complete. That means any caller can fill in for any other caller and know exactly where they are and what the floor dance capabilities are or what they should be, because standard application will do that, the program design will do that, the program recognition and the defining program lists will do that. That's a absolute bonus. You've got the standard application policy. That's an absolute pro. This allows for the commonality and familiarity for the dancers to succeed and learn it successfully. It also forces a lot of these callers that we've had in the past to rein in that desire for technical cleverness and use the material that's available properly, but with innovation and variety. They get their innovation, they get their variety, they get their use of the material and the clever, witty choreography that the dancers love and can succeed at, because they have to use the material from standard applications properly. And you know what? You can get a lot of innovation and variety because you're forced to. Callers are being forced to learn how to call and recall how to do it properly. A big pro, it does have a shorter teaching and learning time because we're taking all that extemporaneous stuff out of it. You can theoretically teach a full program in a shorter time. You can start multiple classes in a year. Those are two big bonuses. I think 2 a year is probably good, but you can do more. It's entirely up to you. Or if you're lucky, like in Larry's area, and you've got multiple groups, you can encourage them to go and dance with other groups, encourage your own dancers to go and visit other clubs. And if they can't come to your night, you give them the list. I know when I was calling in Ottawa, that was one of the biggest things that happened. Mary Squares and what was Paul's group called?
Village Squares.
The Village Squares, my group, Bob Cathcart. If you couldn't make my night, I'd send you over to Paul's night. Paul was sending dancers my way. We were sending them over to Mary Squares because all the callers got together and we had pretty much the same kind of programs running simultaneously, except Paul, who took a full year to dance basic. But you could go and do and dance, and we all supported each other that way. There's a lot of places in the States that, this is only anecdotal, but they tell me they don't do that. They don't want their dancers to go and dance to another caller. They want the dancers on their floor. And if they can't dance on that night, well, too bad. But I'm not going to recommend somebody else because I'll just lose dancer. Well, that's the whole wrong attitude. And the fourth pro is it's a destination designed for fun and sociability. And that's the medium, and the medium is square dancing. The fixed commonality of the program during and after allows for a common ground for all dancers that dance to know exactly what to expect and to judge their own capabilities of where they can dance. There should not be any of this, oh, come on, we'll pull you through it, that we got now. There shouldn't be anything, oh, well, come on up, we'll teach you. If you haven't danced, I'll just modify the program and show you how to dance or relay the doozy. But don't worry, somebody will pull you through. All of that should stop. The focus is more and where it should be on fun and sociability rather than worrying about what they can and what they can't do at an advertised dance, which is what we have now. What I found really interesting in trying to do an objective analysis of the SSD program is that the cons look very familiar. The program is fixed and logical is a pro. It's also a con. Many callers don't like that teaching order because they've got to adapt their own existing programs to what is easier for them and their opinion and their choreographic dislikes and likes. We had that in the basic program. We've got the condensed teaching order. We've got the varied teaching order. We've got all this and all of those other kinds of things. So this is what happens. Logical progression is an objective opinion, as has been shown with the proposed teaching order of the basic and mainstream plus, and all the variations such as the condensed teaching order and all that as well. And third, callers that are not familiar with SSD have a hard time with the limitations that are imposed on it. I know a lot of callers that cannot call without a right and left through on their first night. They have a hard time. They don't use wheel around. They don't use a reverse wheel around. They don't use a circle halfway. It's so foreign to them. Well, they have to go back and learn how to do that. The standard application policy. What this does is something that should happen at every program, but it doesn't. It forces callers to work harder to deliver a good program, especially those that rely on technical cleverness or those that rely on pulling material down from the plus level and calling it using basic movements or advanced level and using basic movements. instead of actually calling a good dance. There's a lot of callers that rely on technical cleverness instead of good, solid social danceability. About 50% or more of callers do not know or do not understand or have even read the standard applications document. And that document applies to all square dance programs, not just SSD. It applies to all of them. It has a shorter teaching and learning time. Yes, you can theoretically teach a full program in a shorter time. Teaching, however, does not equate to learning and being successful in applying. All of us were in school, we learned basic calculus from grade 7 forward. How many of us learned it, but other than repetition and rote to get through class, use it or even remember it now or have used it? We didn't have a place. You can start multiple classes in a year. Yes, you can. But again, let's refer to calculus and history and biology, etc. in school. There's multiple classes taught. How many places did we go, or how many places were there for us to go and use it, unless we became specialists for those few that chose to do that? Without a destination reward venue to use and apply the fundamentals of sociability and fun and the dance, multiple classes are totally irrelevant. And not everybody wants to angel repeatedly every 12 to 14 weeks. After a couple of times bringing their friends through, most of their friends are going to be dancing. They want to go somewhere and use what they've learned. They don't want to start the next class. They don't want to start the next class. They don't want to start the next class. Now, if you look at the 12 weeks in itself, it's saying in addition to everything you've learned so far, and having learned box, the nat, hinge, couples, touch a quarter, circulate, name dancers, and all that other kind of stuff, from the standard applications, when you're done and you're a graduated SSD dancer, great, wow, you've got all this material, and come back next week because we're starting a brand new class with circle left. I would get tired of that. I'm sorry. That's just my honest opinion. In 4, we say it's a destination designed for fun and sociability with dancing as a medium. Okay? This is the standard philosophy of the basic program. That was written in the basic program as well. This is a statement philosophy of the mainstream program. They are fixed and they have a commonality, and the standard applications apply. So what makes us think as callers, if we couldn't do it with that, what makes you think we're going to do it now? Until all callers, dancers, club executives climb down off their pedestals, and these are the pedestals we put ourselves on, SSD is not going to work. We need a complete change of mindset, holistically and collectively, and the commitment to the application to make that work. Unfortunately, too many don't like change, nor are they willing to adapt because it's challenging and they feel it implies they've been doing it wrong for so many years. The fixed commonality of the program during and after allows for common ground for dancers to know exactly what to expect and how to judge their own capabilities of where they can dance. That's true for every program. Unfortunately, it's the callers, it's us as callers that forget this. The focus is more on fun and sociability where it should be, rather than worrying about what they can and cannot do at an advertised dance. That's why these are both pros and cons, and I think you can figure out what I mean, why this is a con. And that's because that's not because of the dancers. The dancers don't make that as a con. We as callers do. Almost all of these negatives are caller associated. So if we want to use this program effectively and give it a chance, we have to change our mindset. And there's 7 simple guidelines. 1, remember, it is a standalone program. It's not a stepping stone to mainstream or a fast track to refill halls. Don't believe that in 12 weeks you can create super dancers. It's not possible. You can, however, create good dancers with a foundation on which to build and gain confidence, something that they want to share and something that they want to enjoy. It has the potential of doing that, and that's what we're in the business of. Each SSD class is a separate program requiring time. If you're going to teach a program in 2.5 hours a night for 12 weeks, then do that with the next class, and do that with the next class, and do that with the next class. You've also got to give them, those that have gone through it, a place to go and use it without interfering with the second class requirements. Do not share the program with mainstream and plus groups on a single night. Don't do it. All this says is we're teaching you how to dance, but when you graduate it means nothing because you can't dance with the rest of the club anyway because you don't know this stuff. But we can teach you. Well, what was the purpose of SSD in the first place? You've got to plan dances and activities around SSD. Keep it at a single hall level. Don't shove them into a side room somewhere. That's why BASIC failed as a program. It was not considered a program. It was considered a stepping stone, which it wasn't. Remember that SSD is a Collar Lab program. Give it the recognition it deserves. Make sure that there's an SSD hall at the festivals and the conventions so that they feel like they're part of that activity. This is the one that I get a lot of trouble in saying. Encourage your SSD dancers not to go to mixed level events. And then when I say a mixed level event, I mean that's if you've got a dance that's got 3 levels in the same hall, tell your SSD dancers not to go. They're going to get ripped off by paying the full price to watch everyone else dance for more than half the evening doing stuff that they may or may not do. Or you're going to say, hey, it's mainstream. And we can't dance mainstream because we don't know how to do the spin the top. And the caller calls something that is SSD 7 in the mainstream program because it's mainstream. Okay. And 7, do not try to get fancy or clever with your choreography or bring stuff down from mainstream plus or A1 or whatever. If you want to teach mainstream, then teach a mainstream club and not an SSD club. There's more than enough material in the extended applications and the standard application variations to provide workshop material after graduation. There's nothing wrong with bringing down a single movement from mainstream like spin the top as a one-night workshop, but it's not part of the program. And that's done after they've graduated, after they've done the extended applications, after they've played with the salve, and you've got a place. That becomes no different than a quarterly selection or introducing a gimmick movement. Okay? It is a caution. If you can't see yourself sticking to those simple guidelines, such as not looking at it as a fast track to fill up your plus group, or sending your dancers to dancers that they can't do, or give them adequate time to learn, and all those other things, if you can't call a simple but interesting choreographic dance with variety, don't try. If you can't do it, go back and learn how to call more effectively. SSD is not, and I've heard this argument over and over and over of what it is. It's not a program for retirees. It's not a program for snowbirds, that 14-week holiday where they go to winter climbs. It's not a program for use in old folks' home where dancers don't learn or move fast. The truth is, it's none of those things. I know that's going to raise eyes, but bear with me for a second.
Now let me just give a little history.
Bear with me for a second because I want to get this out before it gets interrupted. Okay? Any program can be modified to meet those criteria. So stop trying to peg it into something it's not meant to be. It's not a retiree program. It's not an old folks program. It's not a handy-capable program. It's not a kinder school program. It's not a new basic or mainstream. It's not a kickstart program. It wasn't intended to be those. What SSD is all of those things and more, just like the basic program was, just like the community dance program was. It's not a peg for one genre. It's a full and complete square dance program that is adaptable to all of those things. It's full and it's complete and it's meant to stand alone. And until we change our mindset that it's not gender or age or couples only or any of that, it's not designed to cater to a single audience. It's designed to cater to all ages with the ability to retain information that apply and that and are able to do that physical activity in the form of moving with the music and achieving a purpose. And that means if you're 6 to 96 or on either side of that, depending on your physical and mental capability, you can social square dance. It's a program to come and have fun and learn dancing and share that experience with others. And it can be applied to all those other misconceptions. But the big question is, why are we trying to label it into something? We didn't label basic and mainstream as any of those, but it applied just as well. Those programs worked and they worked well, but only when we took the time to modify them to the target audience. Guess what? SSD does the same thing. And if you've got good calling skills to the target audience, you can make it work just like we made it work when, we call dancers and we call for the dancers and not for the callers. Okay, and until we change that mindset, SSD is never going to work. But if we're willing to collectively do it, it will, or at least the majority. Then it will work, frankly, because it will survive and be active in 30 years. Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, I'm not disagreeing with all of that, but it's just a history of how it came about. Okay, I believe it came about because of all the winter programs they had where the snowbirds went and danced for 12 weeks. then after they got through learning 12 weeks, they had nowhere to go.
Yep. And
And
that was
so,
absolutely that's part of the thing I was going to try and get into the history of it, because this is a full blown. It's almost in the type of a lecture presentation. But you're absolutely correct. A lot of it was called the trailer park dance or the snowbird dance program, or a number of other things. And there's a whole bunch of different variations on what Club 50 and everything else. But you are right. That is the origins coming down into why it was needed. They needed something that they could do in 12 weeks, simple and easy, that dancers could learn. Okay, now I've got a simple caution on choreography. Okay, SSD must use common sense and caution. Practical common sense is not common. There is a perception that SSD is a simple, easy program that anyone can do, and it doesn't matter if they dance with the music or need extra time or do this. Anybody can do it. Callers don't have to worry about timing and that kind of stuff and all that, because it's such an easy, plain vanilla. That is wrong. It's false. All the fundamental skills and tools of calling apply to SSD the same as they apply to any other program. And it is hard work, and that hard work is necessary to succeed. The SSD program is a Color Lab dance program. The definitions, the chiming charts, rules, conventions are all exactly the same as all the rest of the stuff in all the other current programs that apply. All it is just different movements in a standalone program. Do not cheat the dancers by robbing them of that experience or of enjoying the feeling of a successful, smooth dancing program. You know, it's got to be smooth, it's got to be flowing. Because it's a simpler standard and limited applications of the movement does not mean that you accept bad choreography, poor timing, and uncomfortable dancing. Take the time to get your dancers to move to the music. Keep your music between 120 and 130 beats. 124 to 126 beats per minute is beautiful. Teach them how to move with the beat. Get them to dance the movements in time. Betsy Gotta had one of the best expressions that when she was up here doing a caller's workshop. Says if it takes them 20 beats to learn how to do square through, then take 20 beats to teach it to them. But once they know it, get them dancing it in 10 beats or from a static square 12. Get them moving to the music, because that's what's going to make them better, successful dancers. Take what you need to teach it, but make sure they dance it properly. Make your choreographic sequences between 60 and 64 beats. That's the full. That includes a swing and the promenade. I'm not saying don't modify your choreography to allow timing adjustments for dancer success. But what I am saying is a musical square dance phrase is usually 64 beats. So check your choreography and all of that stuff to say the stuff that you research into your repertoire, not only for flow and smoothness, but also for timing.
Mel?
Remember, yeah.
Okay, are you saying that when you call patter, you should resolve at 60?
No, I'm talking about singing calls here.
Oh,
That's why I said a singing call is 64 beats. But if you go back to the SSD programs and the initial concepts that people wrote down, that was one of the biggest complaints. They focused on the fact that some of those singing call figures had 30 beats of dancing and 64 beats to do it in. And they said, well, we're not teaching our dancers to do square through in 25 beats. That's not dancing. That wasn't the intent. And this is where we say everybody makes mistakes. The worst mistake is using stuff that you've borrowed or researched into your repertoire that has mistakes in it. You're not only cheating the dancers of a rewarding experience, worse, they often feel that when you do that, they've done something wrong, and you're talking and calling down to them as idiots, giving them that extra time, whether you intended it or not. Dancers are people, and as such, you need to treat them with respect. Give them what they pay for. Think of them as you're paying somebody to clean your house. If you pay them to clean your house, you don't want them to come and sit for 45 minutes and do 15 minutes of work and you pay them for an hour. Well, why would dancers expect to pay for 64 beats of dancing and you only give them 30? They're not there to stand around for, the other 34 beats of music.
Hey Mel, this is Kurt again. I would take it one step further and say not only is it should you give as much caller technique and focus on flow and danceability as with all other programs, but probably even more so, if anything, it's a requirement, because the whole idea here is that the focus is on the danceability and not on the experience of the dancers having choreographic surprises, and so therefore the danceability is a key piece of the
Absolutely.
experience for the dancers.
Somebody once said that if you want to have surprise get outs, you want to have that wow gotchas. But if everything is a wow gotcha and everything's a surprise, nothing is. That surprise should be the little piece of, that extra chocolate with the rich, creamy bite that you get. Wow, oh, I didn't expect that. The cake itself should be well iced and well decorated, but the cake has to have a solid foundation on which to build on. And this is what we're saying. You need good, solid, comfortable, familiar dancing that the dancers are successful, they're familiar with, they're comfortable with, they enjoy, and every now and then there's that little piece of extra frosting, that you can rub your finger on the edge of the plate and steal that little flour, that candy flour. That's what it's about. I put 4 sequences of choreography. We're getting pushed for time, but I do want to look at these little sequences because there's some fundamental things on them. Okay, so here's there you go, normal speed. So we'll play this. What do we got here? Right, right, left, through, pass through. Yeah, okay. Now we look at this. It actually flows pretty good. There's all sorts of different things that go on to that. Half sachet, swing your corner, and promenade. And with a concurrent activity, that takes 64 to 65 beats of music to complete. In a fast-paced group, they wouldn't have any problems with it. To me, however, there's a couple of serious issues, not with the choreography, not with the dancing, but things that callers have to understand. First is swing your corner and promenade comes at 48 beats. This is where you're at 48 beats, halfway across the square. It's not a big problem, but if the dancers do fall behind, you need to drop something or put something, if they do fall, you need to be able to drop something, and the caller needs to be able to recognize it and where they can do it or make those adjustments within the program level. Of course, the easiest is of course, flutter wheel and sweep a quarter. Before that half sachet or before the right and left through, you could easily call pass through and U-turn back or rather than a right and left through and half sachet. What you can't do is call box the nat, same girl swing, because box the nat isn't on the list. That doesn't get taught for another 5 weeks. Those are the things that callers have to be aware of, that all of those little equivalents and everything else that you may know and you may have in your tool bag, you have to rethink and adjust. It's not hard choreography. It's just a little bit different choreography that you have to change the mindset on how you're going to proceed with it. I'm going to go quickly on these and we can come back and discuss these if you want to at the end here. Okay. Here's another one. Okay, now this takes 54, 56, 58 beats of music if there's a stop after the right and left through. But it leaves the dancers standing at home for a full 10 beats of music. I don't have a problem with this because I can add a do-si-do before the swing through or play with any of the 4 to 6 beat fillers, pass through, turn around, swing your corner, all of those kinds of things at the end. But that's written like that, and that takes 54 beats of music. And you've got 64 beats of music. That gives you 10 beats of music to play with. But if you're going to copy that and that's your singing call figure, you better look at it and look at the timing. Don't just copy it in. There's a lot of things in the SSD program that are in there that are like this. And like with any piece of choreography, that's fully acceptable, that's fully danceable, it's easy to do, but you have to make sure that it works and it times out well for you. Don't just take it as a standard. Bob Elling is working on a program right now that's designed for SSD, new SSD callers. The idea is to have from hi, I'm a non-dancer, circle left, and everything going in with tip for tip for tip for tip, a whole teaching program, records, music to support it, the whole thing as a teaching document and as a progressive learning document that's going to have all these kinds of things. And it's going to have a lot of choreography. even though it's gone through and probably going to have 20 eyes on it, take the time to go through it and do it yourself and dance to see where there are glitches. Most choreography is written like this. Head square through, swing through, boys run, Ferris wheel, centers right and left through with a full turn. Okay, that centers wheel around is just how I do the full turn. Swing your corner and promenade. That's how it'll be done. It's not going to say heads or head two couples square through, 4 hands around you go, find your corner, make an ocean wave, swing. It's not going to have that stuff in it. You as a caller are expected to learn and know that stuff and develop those skills on your own. Some of it will for the singing calls. Most of it doesn't. Okay, here's one that is a classic example of why. I'm just going to play this. This is head star through, double pass through, centers in, cast off 3/4, star through, double pass through, zoom, leader's trade, swing through twice, swing your corner, and promenade.
Whoa.
Okay, that's in the SSD Color Lab approved document. That's a perfectly acceptable figure. Double pass through, centers in, cast off 3/4, beautiful flow, star through, double pass through, zoom, leader's trade, swing through again, swing your corner, and promenade. And that flows beautifully. That does actually time out to 64 beats in music, and you're going in the next one right about here, head star through, and they would just wheel right in and carry on. Beautiful piece of choreography. What's wrong with it? Anybody?
I would assume that the dancers would have trouble doing a zoom from a completed double pass through. I'm not saying that it can't be done.
I'm saying you're absolutely correct. Okay, if you look at that zoom, it's done from a completed double pass-through position. The standard applications document, and this is where, people make mistakes. The standard applications document lists zoom as from a double pass-through formation and usually a 0 couple. In other words, boy on the left, girl on the right. But it says, but other arrangements are not a problem. In the standard application document, that's what it says. This zoom in here is done from a completed double pass-through position. It does say in the SSD document that zoom from a completed double pass-through may require workshop. The issue I have with is in the document itself, the sequence is using an extended and non-standard application of zoom. Zoom is taught in lesson 9 and uses the movement from a double pass-through only. There's nothing from a completed double pass-through. Zoom is taught in week 9, suggested in week 10, it's used in week 9, suggested in week 10 is this from an extended formation, and it's not seen again in the SSD program document anywhere, nor is it seen in any follow-up choreography. It's listed in a singing call only. There's no pattern instruction, there's no workshopping instruction, there's nothing for it. Now, this is not saying it's wrong, but what's being pointed out is this is an SSD teaching guide which periodically misses things in its own rules and guidelines, but also it's a guide with a limited number of ideas and meanings that callers both new and experienced must do their homework in planning, preparing, and applying this program. If you don't take the time as a caller to do the work that's required to present this program and deal with this program, you will fail and your dancers will fail and you will lose them accordingly.
So do the zoom before the double pass through and you can use that figure.
Yep. There's all sorts of ways of making that right. Me personally, I would take this after they've done the 12 weeks and this becomes an extended application workshop evening to develop after the fact for a little bit of interest and variety. I would not put this in the teaching program, but that's my opinion.
If you do zoom before the double pass through, then you have a problem with body flow. Because after a star through, the dancers are turning the wrong way to do a zoom.
Star through and zoom is not a good combination.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so in conclusion, I'm just going to conclude this. We'll come back for the discussion, but it's important to remember that the fundamental failure and the reasons we're in this condition of decline for square dancing is not because of square dancers. It's not because the activity is old. It's not because it's old-fashioned. It's not because we have bad music, because none of that is true. The reason we are in decline is the callers. We as callers must pull our collective heads out and accept the blame for what we've done collectively over the last year. Not individually, because not everybody is fault, and there's some excellent callers out there that have been doing this for a long, long time, which I only wish I had half the experience and capability that they had. Okay? It's important to remember that the fundamental failures and the reason is the callers. The reason that there's a need for change of how we do things is the callers. The reason we're so inflexible and rigid in accepting change or accepting new ideas is the callers. The reason square dancing has become a technical jigsaw puzzle of challenge after challenge, catering to the elite and culling the weak and chaff from the activity, is the callers. The main reason callers claim that dancers can't dance well anymore is because we're not doing our job properly. We lost the plot. The reason this new program will work or will not work is the callers. Now, those are harsh statements, and I will stand by them. Many great callers have succeeded with basic and mainstream programs and call exceptional dances and teach exceptional classes. There's no argument with that. Some will take a full year to teach basic and another year to teach mainstream, and then they're successful on average 3 to 4 new squares of dancers every year. Others, like myself, before I moved to Australia, I taught a basic and a mainstream class in a year, 1 year. And then they danced it, graduated for 2 more years before even thinking about teaching plus to them. And then only if they were interested, and it was not as a feeder to a plus group or anything like that. In some places in Europe and in some places in the US and elsewhere, there still remain some very successful basic clubs. Sweden has a number of basic clubs. There's a couple in Germany as well. Some very successful mainstream clubs exist, and they all have supporting activities and places to go and enjoy what they know. Unfortunately, this normal is not normal. Clubs, classes, and callers are in decline, and unless we change what we do and how we do it to a pure and concentrated focus on the dancers at all ages and give them a product that they want to use and come to and make the time for, neither square dancing as it is nor the SSD program as it's proposed is going to work or survive. Finally, is SSD the answer? I don't know. What I do know is, regardless of where square dancing goes in the future, unless we as callers can convince the executives and all the dancers and ourselves to change our mindset and get past this petty one-upmanship of hyper-focus on choreographic technicality and technical dancing and right, wrong, and legal and illegal, versus dancers out there having fun and success with square dancing, regardless of the program, we're going to continue to decline into oblivion until this activity doesn't exist anymore. And there's a lot of callers right now that have accepted that I'm not going to change, I'm just going to call because I've only got 5 or 6 more years in me. My dancers have only got 5 or 6 more years in me. I'm going to die, have a heart attack, or get too old and retire. After that, I really don't care. And that's the attitude that we're saying. My attitude is, I don't care if I die. I want the activity to live. And I want to help people get to that point where a brand new caller can pick up whatever I've got and run with it and pick up these lessons and say, hey, that's not a bad idea. Hopefully I can get there someday, and I can reinvigorate that thought in myself, in my dancers, in somebody else learning to call. I do apologize. That was very, very fast and furious. We're about 10 minutes over, but I am very, very happy that the discussion was there and you guys chimed in. So let's open this up. There was a couple of comments in the chat. I've tried to incorporate them into the discussion as they came in. One of the last ones, Daryl, before he left, asked, as he gets into license, it takes him longer to review than it does him to teach. Yes, that's common. Even without the 13, it's a bit of a pie in the sky. And he intends to use the SSD list, but he won't use the suggested teaching order, and he won't feel comfortable calling SSD until he's called it. And this is where we have these kinds of things coming out. If you're going to use the SSD list in the program, the idea is, unless you are the only club in your area and you're the only caller in your area that's going to do it, I want to be able to call an SSD dance, and if Bob Elling happens to come down, or John Jurgens, or Francis comes down to my area, or Kurt, we're doing SSD 7, they can do SSD 7 because my SSD 7 is your SSD 7. That's the big strength of it. Let's open it up for questions. Kurt.
Yeah, I want to respond to that specific point. There's two different things in my mind. There's an SSD dance to me is a full level SSD dance. What you're talking about by picking SSD week 7 or whatever is a class level dance. And there are advantages and disadvantages of integrating different classes together at that level. And usually those all need to be solved in a way that works for the particular group of clubs that are trying to coordinate. And being able to label it by a level of a SSD week number as opposed to a long list of specific calls is, you can see there's an advantage to it, but it is not necessarily the only way to do it. For example, we have in our area a website that actually intersects the calls taught between all the clubs and tells you what the common call list is for everybody.
The reason I said SSD 7 or SSD 10 or SSD 5 is when I learned to call, and when I was calling in Ottawa at the time, this is going back, we're talking 18, 20 years ago, when there was dances going on, callers were very, very interactive with each other. I knew that if Wendy was going to come and call at my club, or if I was going to go and call at Wendy's club in Ottawa, we would talk together beforehand and we would find out where the level of dancing was, what the lowest common denominator was, and that's where we would set the program level. If there was a regional dance or a functional dance and there was a basic hall, all the callers in the area would get together and say, at this time, this is the level where we expect dancers to be at. Now, you may have more, you may have less, but this is what's going to be called on that program. In Europe, at the Freshman's Frolic, the halfway dance, and all those things, all the callers would get together and say, this is where your dancers are to be at that level. If they're not at that level, recommend that they don't come. But if they are at that level, or if they're more, this is the level it's going to be called. And that's why I say an SSD dance. They've got to have a place to go. When Jerry proposed this program, it wasn't 12 nights of lessons. It wasn't 12 weeks. It was 12 lessons that could be done in X number of weeks. And that was a 2-hour or a 2.5-hour program, or 14 weeks. He was saying 14 to 16 weeks, 12 weeks of lessons. And that is because there is a place for them to go. At week 4 or week 5, they have a dance just to dance what they've known and enjoy it. At week 8, they have a dance. At week 12, they have a dance. Then they've got another wrap-up, and then they have a graduation dance. That's what I mean. And those are the ones where, I don't know if Larry is still here, but if clubs are going to develop this and become this activity where you've got 3 or 4, and sometimes somebody was saying they had almost 11 squares in their SSD group, when you've got that and you've got a place to go and you've got a place to go and visit, you've got a commonality of function. It doesn't say you have to be identical. But the idea is it's standardized so that, Kurt, I'm coming to your area in San Francisco. Oh, great, but we're only doing SSD 5. Not a problem. I can pick up, and I'm not showing up till 7 o'clock, and you pick me up at the airport and drive me to the dance. I'll get changed in the airport. The dance is at 7:30. Great. I'll have the turntable set up. I can get there, and I will know that I can call an SSD 5 dance.
Right.
That's what I mean by it.
Understood. And the key point is that it becomes a label for a set of calls that you expect at a dance.
That's correct.
It doesn't necessarily restrict you from doing what Darryl was proposing, is working the teaching order to what works for him.
Absolutely.
He would just have to, before sending folks to a dance, or figure out what week number plus miscellaneous other calls, but you have to ignore those miscellaneous other calls that he's already taught. He has to know which week number is completely covered by the calls that he's taught. That's correct. The level that he can say his dancers can participate in. Yeah. And it's also about communicating to the dancers, this is a dance you can go to, or this is a dance
and a lot of callers
we are not yet up to speed for it.
A lot of callers are scared to do that, and a lot of dancers, or especially club executives, overdo that. Say, oh, come on, we'll drag you through. Where the issue arises is, and why, I know it's bad. What I'm saying is, what this program will do is it will make callers go back and learn about calling again. And that's one of the best examples, because most callers I know, when they're doing something, that will probably do right and left through on week 2 or 3 instead of week 7. And if you don't do your homework and you're not familiar with the lists, then you're going to go to an SSD 4 club or something like that and call right and left through. And it's going to hurt you. That's just the norm. And that problem existed with basic. That problem existed with mainstream.
Well, that
problem
exists with anything.
That's
stepping in and
communication.
if you're calling somebody's class level, you'd better know exactly.
And that's where communication and all that needs to come into play. That's always existed. There's nothing new in SSD that wasn't there before. We just need the mindset. Chris, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm not all that convinced that class level dances are that big a deal. The big thing to me is that they know, as they're going through class, that they're going to be places for them to go dance, and we have to we have to provide them with regular, whether it's once a month or whatever it is. Maybe if there's if you have a bunch of different clubs, they would wind up having something every weekend, all together. But I'm thinking of people who have graduated the SSD thing. Now there's the obvious benefits to callers and clubs, and for that matter, dancers who might have something preventing them from going to a class on a given week. Having to miss a night of their regular thing, and if there's another club in the area but it meets on Wednesday instead of Thursday, maybe they can make that Wednesday. And so if you're all in sync that way, but like you say, that's nothing new, and regional caller associations have often had the callers coordinating on that, and there's a lot of benefits to that. As far as the class level dances, I don't know. I think of it more as that the fact that we're having the class time be so limited, and only we keep saying not weeks, but it's going to turn out to be a certain number of weeks, and we're going to try to keep that number fairly small. And yeah, I think you should build in some practice days, some practice nights in that thing too. But I think the thing about being able to go to a dance is really more after you're a graduate. In fact, if you have if you're advertising dances as SSD 3 and this one over here is SSD 7 and what have you, I think you might even create problems with that, where of exactly the sort that you're talking about. Like, well, I'm only SSD 4. Oh, come on, we'll pull you through it.
No, that wasn't the intent. And if I gave that impression, I do apologize, because that's not what I was trying to get across. What I was trying to get across is that in an area where you have the ability to share and visit and everything else, when we dancing basic and mainstream, visiting other clubs was very, very common. And in some places it is still very club to do club visits or go and dance with other clubs and whatnot. In some places there's dancers that are now dancing plus, and they have never danced in another hall on a different night or with another caller, and that's fine. And that's becoming more and more common set now, especially as dancers get older. They have their one night a week and that's their activity. What I'm talking about is the activity as a whole. And if we want to invigorate it and we want to reestablish it, we need to have a certain amount of commonality. We need to have that ability to encourage dancers to become social and interactive with strangers, because you're walking into a hall full of strangers with something common right in mind. When I say SSD 4, I'm not talking about advertising an SSD 4 dance or an SSD 5, unless it's at, hey, there's a big festival, we're having the halfway dance, and it's SSD, mainstream plus, and those are the three, or sorry, SSD plus A1. Those are the three halls that are there. There's an SSD hall. Well, that would say SSD 5, because that's the level it's going to be called there. Interclub and interregional, that's communication. I think that's where you were going, Kurt, is that's communication that has to reestablish, that has been lost in a lot of places, not just everybody, because some people still have it really good, but in a lot of places that's been lost because callers don't communicate, or callers have become very, very protective of their own little piece of turf and scared to lose it, so that they're defending their cells, their dancers, rather than promoting the activity as a whole. I would not advertise SSD1, SSD7, SSD5 as dances in an area. I would encourage callers like, you've got an SSD class, Chris, Kurt's got one, Mike's got one, Betsy has one. Our commonality is SSD7. So we're going to get together and have a big collective club meet and greet, and it's going to be SSD7. That's what we've all agreed on. That's what I'm talking about.
It requires coordination beyond what the SSD program says, because as you say, the number of weeks that you take, depending on how you chop up those 12 lessons, is variable, and some people could be going at only half the pace of the others. So there won't always be an overlap.
And that's why I said that it doesn't require anything different or anything new that wasn't there in the basic program or the plus program. It's the same. Nothing has changed other than callers have to change their mindset of what they can and can't do to learn a new program. And we had this discussion when we said for plus and challenge and advanced dancers, it's very hard for them to come down, especially if they haven't done it in a long time, to come down and call a basic level dance in a basic hall at a convention. In Sweden, they had one of these big festivals, and they actually had to, the big name callers that they had for the advanced challenge weekend, because they had to actually hire local callers on the spot, because you couldn't call that level of dance. It just wasn't capable of doing it without going back and preparing. Well, we have to do that, and that applies to everywhere.
Yeah, that's another thing that, like almost everything about SSD, it's another thing that's same old problem with same old obvious solution, which is, I mean, if you can't call without right and left through, I mean, there's something wrong with you.
It's not going to happen. I've got Francis, Kurt, and Brian.
So we're just waving to each other.
Oh, you're waving to each other. Okay, Kurt.
Okay, so one thing where there is a change is in some cases in tools, and here's where it can be very advantageous to be aware of where your class is relative to the SSD lesson number, because the Cedar.net choreography database now tags items with SSD week number. It's technically lesson number, but they call it week number.
Yeah.
And you can filter based on that as well. So if you are stepping in to somebody's class that you know they've gotten through SSD lesson number 5, or you're looking for additional material for yourself to cover through SSD lesson number 5, you can go to Cedar.net and say, give me stuff that goes up.
And Bob Elling's program, I believe you're doing something very similar. There's going to be a list of patter routines or sequential routines and modules, as well as singing calls that are there to augment callers to help improve. It's not designed to, I'm going to call SSD, I'll pull all these programs off. That is a great tool, and it's an absolutely fantastic tool to be able to pull prepared material on. But it's also a tool that you've got to go in and learn to write your own. If you haven't used a reverse wheel around in a long time, well, maybe it's time to start looking at your choreography and start introducing these things back into your repertoire, because we're cheating the dancers of experiences. I know a lot of plus dancers that will argue, well, reverse wheel around shouldn't be on, you shouldn't do that until advanced because we don't use it. Well, that's the wrong way of doing it. It should be on basic because it is on basic. If it's not being used, that's not the program problem, that's the caller program. Betsy, you're very quiet in here. I was kind of hoping we'd get some feedback from you, because you use a modified teaching program in use, I believe, the condensed teaching order, but you also do a lot of these things, and a lot of the aspects of what you do apply, and the rules and the applications apply to taking this SSD journey, if you will.
I was just reading John Jurgens had sent me, this is right, Betsy, this is right along the same line as your presentation on bad dancers. Here's another problem callers have created and are now trying to solve.
Yep.
And that's true. And the thing is, if you are not used to doing it, you will have to relearn things. Those of us who've been teaching on a regular basis are used to working with limited amounts of calls. Anybody who's taught classes should be reasonably good at teaching or working with the SSD program, because they're used to limiting the number of calls. It may be a different subset that they have to make sure they're working with, but that should be fine. But if somebody is calling for a mainstream club and they have all this choreography in their head, they're going to have to work at it, because it's like, can't say that.
Yep.
Can't say that.
I call it blue horse syndrome. It came out very evident when I was at a caller school with one of Ken Bertucci's that I was sitting in on. And the first thing he did was, let's start taking movements off the program. And you'll do, okay, I want you to call basic only, but you're not allowed to use right and left through. Okay, now you're not allowed to use right and left through, and you're not allowed to use star through. It's called blue horse syndrome because the only thing that is in your mind is the movements that you can't use.
Right.
And it's like the movement spin the top. I know a lot of callers that are absolutely dependent on spin the top for their flow. Their pat go-to sequence is swing through, spin the top, slide through, or spin the top right and left through, square through three. And without it, they struggle because they're always thinking of that, wow, that little get out from the spin the top. And as Jerry said, spin the top is not on the SSD program. And the reason it's not on the SD program, in Jerry's own words, was, well, we have 50 movements. We had to make a decision. We don't do it all that often around here. I was asked to write it. That was my decision. It was an arbitrary decision based on where they dance. And you know what? I completely agree with that. Not that it's not on the program, but somebody had to make that decision, so somebody did. And this is the program we have. I'm not saying this program's not going to change in the next 5 years. It probably will. But until we get commitment that's consistent and standardized and normalized, and longevity and time so that we can actually analyze what's going on with it, and is it being successful, right now it's still a pipe dream. And until callers change the mindset of it's a feeder, until club executives and dancers change the mindset of, oh good, we'll get lots of new dancers and we can pull them into our group and fill up our coffers again, until that happens, it's not going to work. Or sorry, if that happens, if that continues happening, it's not going to work. Until we change our mindset, it won't work. If we do change our mindset, it has a potential of working quite well. But the only people that can force that change is callers saying, no, this is what it is. This is what we're going to do. I'm not saying don't modify your teaching program, or don't do it slightly different, or don't do it the way it works for you, or more logical for you. But I am saying there are standards to it. There are goals, there's objectives, the same as there is for the other program. Get together and talk with your other callers. Get together and talk with your dancers. Encourage your dancers not to go to that basic mainstream plus night all in the same hall because you've got an SSD group. Because they're going to call an Alamandar, or they're going to call a spin the top, and you're going to go, what? And it's going to happen. And right, all you've created is, I dance SSD, oh, but I can't dance mainstream. But that's a mainstream club. Oh, there's no SSD hall, there's a mainstream hall. When I did the initial analysis with Jerry, we looked at dance programs that were on the internet over 4 years, the big festivals. And over 75% of all of the singing calls that were performed were SSD level. They weren't mainstream, but they were advertised as mainstream because they were on the mainstream program. But any one of them could have been SSD. Some would have been SSD 3 and they're mainstream. Others would have been SSD 10 and they're basic, but they're SSD.
Yeah. I want to say one of the other things that callers will have to do is unlearn their patterns.
Yes.
I caused great consternation one time unknowingly because I was going to be away for a time and I had a caller to substitute for me, and I had just started working on swing through for motion waves. But I have always not deliberately taught swing through in the boys run. in the same night. And I never taught lead right and circle to a line in the same night, because I want the dancers to learn this call starts and ends here.
Yep.
Well, this poor caller, and I gave them the list in advance, but they just were so flummoxed by the fact that they could not use boys run, because I hadn't taught anybody running at all. They didn't know how to get out of an ocean wave without boys run and bend the line or wheel and deal.
Well, you know, the callers who have those kind of limitations, and I think that we've all been there. I mean, I've been doing it forever. So, you know, people, I go to things all the time and people just hand me a list. Here's the calls they know. Okay, fine. But you know, that took a long time to be able to get to that level. But the callers who are maybe you know, having a little trouble with that, who need to relearn a lot of things, the thing, maybe here's a little incentive for them. It's going to make you a more creative caller.
Absolutely.
Having to figure those things out. And so if you think, well, I like to call fancy creative things, you know, maybe not to this crowd, but that's, you know, that's sort of where my head's at. Well, this exercise of being able to call, you want to talk about some creative calling, you know, try to develop choreography with a limited set of calls, and really look and see what those kind of calls, you know, what you can do with them. And, you know, of course, look at the standard applications to get some hints about, you know, so you don't go way off the reservation or get weird or anything, but just looking at reviewing those basic things, just like when we have, you know, brand new callers and we give them the worksheets, you know, that where you take each call and what are all the things you can do after it and all that call analysis. That's, I mean, that's where it's at. And is it work? Yes. And is it hard? Yeah. So be better. Be a pro. Come on.
Oh, absolutely. There is no doubt. Like a classic example, if we go, here's a singing call figure. Heads pass through and wheel around. Same heads do a half sachet. Star through and all pass through. Face in. Pass through. Everybody wheel around and a quarter more. Couples circulate. Now we're circulating up. Chain down the line. Boys walk straight across. Swing your corner and promenade. That's SSD. Heads pass through, reverse wheel around and back away. Sides go forward and back. Star through, centers pass through, circle four left, halfway, veer left, chain down the line, star through, pass through. Alaman left, come back and promenade. All of these things, these are all SSD 5. And when you do that kind of stuff, you can do all sorts of different things. Head ladies chain, sides half sachet, heads lead to the left, same sex, pass through and all face in. Center ladies only, chain, ends, star through, centers lead to the left, veer to the right, partner trade, chain down the line, keeper and promenade. That is week 5 choreography in the SSD program. And that's standard application, choreography, all of that kind of stuff. You can be inventive and you can be creative, and you're not veering, no pun intended, very far off saying, you know, there's nothing wrong with a lady's chain followed by a lead to the left, but we don't call it very often at mainstream. I know, Brian, you do. I see you do. You've used lead to the lefts and things like that a fair bit, but not a lot of callers do. And they don't incorporate it with other things like head lady's chain, sides a half sachet, and that's working concurrently so that when they've done that half sachet, you've got the lead to the left. Oh, what comes next after that? You can do a same sex do side do, pass through, and then all face in. There's my line. Now I'm doing center ladies do something and end dancers do something. And what is it? You've got a normal couple ladies chain and you've got a star through. You know,
Mel?
Yeah.
The chain down the line and have the boys walk straight across is not really nice for the boys.
Yep. You've got the chain down the line, and that's just in that there's enough time in there for a forward and back, and then just the boys go forward. If I was going to call that, just the boys go forward, swing your corner and promenade. Now that's the kind of stuff that you've got, and those are the little timing aspects that are not in the way the choreography is written. And it's a very, very good point. A chain down the line, because you're turning back and then you're walking straight across. Ideally, you want to set that up on the other side so you have the girls walk straight across.
Well, or you could have you could do the chain down the line and do a half sachet, and then the boy, because when he ducks behind to make that little, it's sort of a little U shape, a little convex thing there going on behind as the girl's coming across. So
I'll buy that.
So he has a natural opportunity to walk forward after that. So and just set it up.
There's lots of little fillers. Yeah, there's lots of little fillers. When you're writing choreography or looking at choreography, leave room in there so that you can, dance what it is. If you're doing something that's just a little bit odd, leave room in there so you've got that, 6 to 8 beats of music that you can do a forward and back if you need it. Don't be hesitant to do something like heads from a static square. Heads, veer to the left, chain down the line. Ooh, what's that? If you're working chain down the line and you're just introduced, you're using that in your intro. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And then you do a centers pass through, circle 4 left halfway, veer to the left, couple circulate. Do a couples trade and a couple circulate. Chain down the line, slide through. And what you end up doing is swinging the right hand lady. You're introducing a right hand lady progression. There's nothing difficult with that except heads veer to the left. Well, okay, that's just a little bit different. But if your introduction is chain down the line and that's your workshop focus, absolutely nothing wrong because you built time into the timing of delivering that. It's not something that you want to call constantly. There's nothing wrong with the sequence that we had with facing lines, doing a veer to the left, chain down the line. Works like a charm. And it's part of the standard application process.
No, it doesn't work like a charm. You go into a floor and a lot of people will break down.
If you call it to a floor right now, a lot of people would break down. Why? But if you...
It's not a veer left. The one dancer is walking straight ahead while his partner is veering. And that's...
Sorry, from facing lines of 4, a veer to the left will take you to a title 2 face line.
Yeah, the right-hand couple doesn't veer. They walk straight ahead.
That's correct.
Causes the confusion with dancers.
But the reason that confusion is there is not the movement. The reason that confusion is there is because the time it takes to learn these kinds of things, because that was if you're in the rules and conventions things, that's all clearly explained, because if 2 dancers or couples acting as a unit meant to occupy a space, it always extends outward from the center. It never extends inward to the center. But we don't take the time to do all that.
So the outside couple is like doing a double veer.
That's correct. And you have to allocate the time for that. But these are all sorts of different things, and these are academic technicalities. So would I call that when I was teaching veer and chain? No. Would I do that when I get into the application variations and extended applications after graduation? Yeah, I probably would, because it's part of the dancing. It's not something I would call as a left, right, center, inside, outside, upside down, and backwards. But those are the kinds of things that do happen.
Mel,
in that particular example, it's
Mel, can I just...
1 second. Alan, yes.
Can I just shift the conversation away from discussing choreo type things and say, okay, let's look at the social aspect of social studies. I give you 2 scenarios that we could talk on. You're teaching a class and you're up to maybe week 5 or whatever, and somebody new turns up. That's one scenario. Another scenario is you're calling an SSD dance, but somebody whispers to you, oh, look, we've got some visitors. We brought some visitors tonight, but they've only done SSD 4 or 5 or whatever. So, do we change as callers? What do we change so that we maintain the social aspect of what we're claiming to fit those 2 scenarios?
That is an absolutely fantastic question. I'll deal with the second one first. And I'll deal with it in the example I've had where I've had visitors come to a dance, and this is when I was calling in Europe, and it happened again when I was calling in Alberta. The visitors were just learning mainstream. They were basic dancers. They were traveling around. They were visiting friends, and they came to my dance, 2 couples. As a caller, I wanted them to succeed. I wanted them to have a good time. I was teaching a class, but that became a night at their level. I adapted to their level. It wasn't so far back, and there's enough movement in what they had in the basic program that I could call a decent dance and a very good dance, and everybody is entertained with the program that they could do. That applies everywhere. So if you're doing SSD 7 in your class and you get visitors that come in and somebody whispers at, right before the dance, I brought some friends of mine over, but they only dance SSD 5. A good caller should be able to modify that program, and the SSD program itself is set up in such a way that those dancers can get up on the floor, and you should be able to prompt them through by reining back a little bit and get them to where they want and dance in their comfort zone. The second part of that question is, I'm dancing SSD 5 and I've got a brand new dancer that comes in, or a couple of brand new dancers off the street. Invite them to sit and watch. If they want to have it, make the time, and I've done this many times, make the time to teach them, because at that point we're talking, 10 hours maybe? Not even 10 hours of instruction. I will make that time separate. But would I say, oh, get up and I'm going to change my 5 squares of dancing to accommodate a brand new dancer on the floor? No, I'm not going to. Most people will argue and say, oh, that's wrong, you can't do that. Well, you know what? Yes, I can do that, and that's what I would do. Because in this case, I would say I'm catering to my vast majority of dancers that want to have a good time. You are more than welcome to sit and watch, and if you're interested, I'm more than willing to take a whole weekend and work with you and get some dancers to work with you that you can come back. But I'm not going to change an entire evening because one dancer is there. I'm not going to change a whole program or a dance because if I advertise a waltz competition and one person only knows how to do a cha-cha, I'm not going to say everybody that's there to waltz, sorry, but we're only going to do cha-chas tonight.
Yeah,
some people say that's controversial. I don't.
It's a judgment call about, it just comes down to time. Something like that could be, we talk about having lesson nights where we don't really teach anything or very little, and just a practice. So but it depends on. So they say they dance SSD 4 when they came in to visit, but what happens when they get out there and it turns out that they suck and they can only do SSD 2 and then go to pieces with everything, right? So there's all kinds of factors, and you have to look at your customers and figure out what's going to make what kind of accommodations can I make that'll keep everybody happy. But there is some potential there to be able to entertain visitors who are and the other thing is, of course, that doesn't mean you can't teach anything that night. It means that you can't teach anything that would be based on something that the visitors don't know. But the visitors could pick up just from their standpoint some extra calls from your class as well. So or it could be the case that they're just way too far behind and you really can't accommodate them given the time constraints. And what have you.
And you're right. It is purely a judgment call. I've got Daryl, and then I've got Holly, and then I've got John. Daryl.
I didn't know that you had me.
Oh, I saw you waving your hand.
Yeah, Daryl, you've been had.
I've been had by a lot of them, I'll tell you that. No, could I say, no, I had to skip out earlier. You notice I'm all ready to call my evening dance now. Okay. Did I miss out on all of the really good stuff?
Yeah.
No. Actually, we discussed a couple of the comments that you put in there as well about program modification, everything else, and it clarified something that I think a few people misunderstood about what I was saying.
Okay.
And it was a very good comment.
I didn't have any misunderstanding. I'll tell you what, I've spent all winter doing Tuesday night Zoom sessions with the Oregon State callers, and I've come to some conclusions about SSD. Now, I love the concept right from the start. What we've been missing in square dancing in general is that real basic level. And I know we have the basic program there, but nobody was doing it. But what we do more than anything else that hurts us is extended applications. That's my thought on it. And SSD, the way that it's set up, says, oh, well, we don't dislike extended applications and da 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 da. The minute you teach something and start using it on a regular basis at your dance, it becomes a part of the program that you call, and you have to prepare any new dancers that you have coming into the activity to be able to dance those things. So that's the beginning of the growth of the list of things that you have to teach. And that's what's really got us to where we are now, is just adding more and more and more and more, more movements. And on top of that, more applications of those movements. All right. So all of those nice social type dancers that come for the music and being with their friends, we run them off.
Well, that kind of goes along with what I'm always saying, which is that the main problem with SSD, from my viewpoint, and now I voted for the resolution. I think it's a good idea to try new things, and we'll see what this really turns into, and it'll take a while, and especially with the pandemic. It's not over yet, so we haven't even really started.
Yeah.
But
one of the strengths.
But I see the main problem with SSD, if we're just talking about things like that, is that it's not radical enough.
Yeah,
I would really have a much more pared down program.
I'm going to interject for a second here. One of the things, Daryl, that is really nice about the SSD program is it does recognize the standard application variations. It does recognize the extended applications, but it's very clear in stating that these things are part of the program to be learned and introduced as a workshop or an evening theme after you finish the program. And if you're going to use these in your dance, you introduce them every night. This is a slight variation from the different. That is the nice thing about it.
That was the same thing that happened with the quarterly selection movement. Everybody taught them. Everybody taught them the same way. Everybody in the area did it for 3 months. Nobody got rid of them at the end of that, and therefore you have plus program now. But can I say one more thing, Holly, before I turn it to you? Something that I did discover and come to a conclusion about with the SSD is the areas, the rural areas, where there's one club and no competition for dancers. You can have a standalone program. You can do anything you want. SSD is going to thrive in that place. You get into your urban areas, your metropolitan areas and what have you, where you've got quite a few clubs. We have, I don't know, somewhere between 14 and 20 clubs in the metropolitan area here. 1+ club. They're all mainstream. I don't think it's going to fly. Just isn't going to happen.
Not unless there's a collective.
And you can't do it as a standalone program. Nobody's going to bring their friends, which is our largest source of new dancers, to that program without bringing them up.
Yeah, Larry Marquez was in earlier, and he was talking about in their area, they've collectively as a group got 11 groups, and that's what they do is SSD. They've all decided on that. And there's a 12th one starting up. I'm going to move to Holly because she had her hand up. We got Holly, Malcolm, Michael's got his hand raised, and then Jeff had his. I'm going to have to make a list here. Okay, so Holly, we're gonna start with Holly.
Okay. Well, I have never taught a class, and I've been asked to teach the SSD class. So I started. I'll be on Monday. It'll be my 5th. It'll be lesson 5, and I'm going completely by all of the information from Collar Lab, the SSD program. Now, the club that hired me thinks that I'm going to get through all this in 12 weeks and that I'm going to be able to start another club because we started in July. They think we're going to be able, that I'm going to get them through and be able to start another class at the end of those 12 weeks. And I'm having a hard time explaining to them that's just an estimate of time that I'm going to get through, because last week I had 3 people that came that had not come the week before. They had started with me, but they were gone. So I had to do a lot of catch up with them. And this week I'm going to be doing right and left through and flutter wheel and reverse flutter wheel and whatever. I think
So you're week 6 then. Yeah.
Yes. And I don't know how to explain it to the board because they just.
How many hours?
Question for it. How many hours a night? Sorry.
7 to 9.
7, 8, 9. So you got 3 hours a night.
No, just two. 2 hours. 2 hours a night.
Okay, 2 hours a night, and they want, so that's 22 weeks. That's now you're into what I say is the very minimum. Mm-hmm. And they want 12 weeks. My personal opinion on that is it cannot be done.
I don't think.
And my added opinion is it should not be done. Mm-hmm. If you have a very experienced caller and you've got a young group that's able to do that and you've got all the help and all the support in the world, yeah, you might be able to get through it. Where do they go after that? Is there a place for them to dance what they've learned, or are they going to be starting next class?
That was the other thing I told them. We have to provide dances, and we have several other clubs that are an hour away that are going to be teaching SSD. So we've got a dance planned in November, and they asked me to call it, and I'm going, well, I'm just now learning to call. I'm just teaching this class, and I'm like petrified. But from listening to what you're saying about there's a lot of resources and stuff, and I use a lot of those teaching the class. I use Daryl's book on modern Western square dance with the Sicilians. I use a lot of that to teach them, but I'm just panicking because the
Sicilian circle will be your friend with SSD. I can tell you that right now. I would strongly recommend stick to your guns, and I personally wouldn't do it if you've got 2 hours a night, allow yourself 15 weeks, do only two classes a year, allow yourself 15 weeks so that you can build into that review and refreshing. Are your nights including 2 or 3 nights of come and try before your classes start?
We did actually. They did 3 because we had such a great response.
And then it's 12. And then it's 12 weeks after that 3.
No, they were counting it as from the.
Okay, cannot be done because you've lost 3 weeks of dancing.
No.
And in addition, once you get them through the last week, which takes a little bit longer, as Mel just told you, they have to dance, just plain dance, for at least 4 weeks, I'd say, before you even think about sending them to help start another class.
See, where SSD has the advantage, if you can do 3 nights open house, like come and try it, and you do that repeat, that's your social, interactive, building the family experience. Then you do your classes. Your classes, after that 3 weeks, your class starts night 1, which should be refresher and introduction to anybody new, which should go a lot faster, and you may even be able to pull a movement off the next list if you got nobody new. And then you've got 15 weeks. Then you got your 16th week is graduation. Then you can start your new class. That would be the ideal situation on a 2-hour night. That to me is still rushed, but that's a comfort level where the dancers can make the maximum of the experience.
How do I can't get it through their head.
Well, you have to explain to them. I says, I can't do it. I'm sorry. And callers, much as I hate to say this, and I appreciate it, callers have to be able to say, what you're asking of me, I cannot do. I'm a new caller. I've talked with experienced callers. I've talked with mentors doing this. This is a guideline that a very experienced caller with 50 years of experience and is professional that does this 7 days a week, 4 times a day, is able to do this in 22 hours or 12 weeks of teaching. I'm not that person. I'm sorry. I can do this, however, which will suit you and get you dancers that are going to want to come and have fun and stay with the club. But if I rush them through the way you're going to have a lot of students and you're going to have no dancers.
I have 2 squares of students and then no angels. So they're going to talk to some.
That's not a bad thing.
No.
Okay. I don't have an answer other than that for you, but I strongly offline you. If anybody has any tips or experiences, get a hold of Holly, put your email in the chat, and connect and help out. Mel?
I just want to say she shouldn't say she can't do it because she's a new caller, because I don't think that you cannot force dancers to learn in a certain period of time.
You may end up with the exceptional class that's able to do it in 5 weeks. That happens. Or you may throw a big party if you're allowed to and have a blast weekend to refresh everything and do a few new things.
That might be nice.
All sorts of different things. Like I said, I know callers that have said, we're going to do the SSD program this weekend. It's 22 hours. That's 2 days of 10 hours of calling. Malcolm, you were next. I can't hear you, Malcolm. You're muted. You're muted, Malcolm.
Malcolm is muted.
I can see you talking, but we don't know what you're saying.
Sorry, okay. I didn't actually have a question before, but sort of following really on from that last discussion, I don't know if I've sort of missed something or a bit sort of naive, but I mean, does it matter if it takes the class 18 weeks to do it? I mean, if they were going to do it in 12 weeks, presumably they're going to carry on dancing anyway. They're not going to stop because they've got to the 12 weeks and they're going to be carried on. It just means that, you know, as those say 18 weeks, 20 weeks, 24 weeks, they're learning more new stuff as they go along, rather than just sort of repeating what they've done for the 12 weeks.
The question is, does it matter to the dancers? And the answer is no. Does it matter to club executives and people that do programming and structuring that have their collective heads put in the north end of a southbound cow? Yes, it does, because they're all about their own programming and their way of this is how it should be done. This is the way we've always done it. And unfortunately, we're the only people that can change that mindset, because club executives want to run. I had one, I actually have turned down clubs calling because they wanted to control the program and the classes of when it runs. I says, no, you have control over this. I'll run everything by you, but I control the floor and the program. I'm sorry, I'm not going to call for you. And I've done that. And I know a few other callers who do it. It was the best advice I was ever given. When you're the caller, you control the floor. They control all the administration and everything around the club. They can hire you or fire you, but you have control of the floor. And if it takes you that long, build that long into the structured program that you're selling. And that's all I can say. But sometimes some club executives are saying, if you can't do it, we'll hire somebody that can. And they'll go down the list till they get somebody that says yes. And unfortunately, most of the time, the dancers suffer.
But I think to answer Michael's point
specifically, doing it, you know, it's for the dancers. It's not for the executives of the clubs. It's for the dancers and what they enjoy. And what
unfortunately, that's not always the reality.
But the thing is that what the point that they is being trying to address, wherever people's heads may be in whatever portal, is the idea of running multiple classes in a year and how quickly can you run them. And the reality that the people that are responsible for running classes have to do promotion and advertising and schedule halls and stuff like that. So there is a certain lead time for planning the beginning of the next class. We have to acknowledge that reality. But we need to work with them and make sure that they set realistic dates for those.
Yep. And if you remember, right at the beginning when I talked about marketing, you cannot get realistic product sales and longevity if you cannot deliver the product that you're marketing. And a complete class in 12 weeks, if that's the product you're marketing, you better be able to deliver it, because otherwise that's false advertising, and in any other activity that would be considered illegal. Malcolm, we're going to come back to you because Michael, you've been waiting for an awful long time.
Yeah. Start with a song. Jerry did that one. Don't know where to start now that we're falling apart. Mm-hmm. It seems like we're inventing the wheel new. I think and there's a lot of effort I realize put in the SSD, and I think changes need to be made. But on the other hand, whatever success is posted right now by so many people, and I think that's good for the activity. Wouldn't that also be achieved with the basic program?
It would, and that's very.
This is just one thing, because I think we need to be honest, because I've been following this discussion, and when taking the SSD, and we're on lesson 2, and now we're on 4, and maybe we can shift something from 5 to 6 or whatever, and try to go somewhere else to dance. I mean, we got student parties over here, and we use the basic program.
Yep.
And we use the Column App teaching list, and when we sign out a dance, then we just say it goes up to whatever 28 dive through, I think it is, or we go till the next session will be 4 weeks later. We go up to 30 whatever and put that on the flyer, and then every class which is run can look if they can make it and send their dancers there, but you would have to stick with the teaching order. And if we do not do that, what sense does it make? And the same thing goes for the SSD.
This is what I was saying earlier with that, Michael, is that yes, there is flexibility, but this is why I was saying that callers, and I know Europe does that and they still have that structure, which is really good. They collectively get together and decide what the level is going to be before they put on a dance like that. And I wish more would do it.
What was the intention, and this is my next point, of creating the SSD? To get more people in the activity.
No.
Definitely yes, I think.
No,
talking to Jerry,
that was one of the intentions, but that was not the intention.
Let me finish. And I think, what do we have? We have a super product with square dance. We have body and brain balance, as I call it. We have really a fitness program for the whole body. We have the sociability, which we may have lost through all the technical type thing and chess playing, but we've got that in square dancing. And we have one bonus, which is unity. I mean, people who don't speak the language of someone else go on the dance floor and can dance with each other. It's just like playing soccer, but I think it's more thrilling. Okay, so. But what it takes for
it's less violent. It's less violent.
Right.
Well, it depends on the square, really.
and what we really need to not split up, we need one entry level, and I don't matter how you call it, as long as everybody uses it as an entry level. And the entry level needs to be a foundation for people who someday, and be assured, the same thing will happen in SSD, will move on to do some more. That doesn't mean they will drop out of the level, out of the entry level, if that is interesting, but it needs to be a stepping stone as well as a destination level. To be there.
And this is why it was both on both the pro and the con list, because that is the very argument that is there. We've got a very good program in BASIC. Unfortunately, BASIC wasn't working. It wasn't because anything wrong with the program. It was the problem with the callers. And it was recognized as something that was needed. But we have to be consistent across the globe if we're going to make SSD work.
If the word basic is a bad selling point, let's get another one. I'm with it. Okay? In English speaking. But what I'm really putting an emphasis on, whatever we do should work worldwide. This is one of our biggest selling points. Well, not in Corona times right now, but I hope when the pandemic is over, we all can travel again, business-wise, holiday-wise, and then can meet and dance with each other and be friends all over the world. I think this is a real big selling point, and we should not lose that by splitting up with one entry level and another entry level or a destination level or whatever.
Absolutely no argument from me on that, and a lot of other callers are the same thing. What we do not have is consistency, and that's why when I talked about marketing, our competition is not ballroom dancing and it's not bowling and whatnot. Our competition is ourselves and the other programs. And unless we recognize that and stop fighting amongst each others, unless our club executives can say, right, this is what we're going to do and callers are going to do it and we do it consistently, we are always going to be a divided activity and it's not going to work. And I can guarantee that. It's designed, and even Jerry would say, if a basic and mainstream program is working in your area, don't change it because it's working, but it's not working everywhere. Well, I disagreed with him on that. Yes, if you've got a program that works great, by all means, it's a great program. But that's not going to help your dancers interact with the rest of the world, and that's not going to help the rest of the world interact with your dancers. It's creating pockets of isolation. The second point that you made was the SSD success. A lot of callers are having a lot of success with SSD. My personal opinion on that, and that's why I said we need at least 5 years of longevity to get some data, because right now what we have is what I consider a false economy with square dancing with the SSD program. The same as when the military goes into a country like Bosnia and they create a false economy. It looks really great until they pull out because now it's back to what it was before and everybody wants to go back. We have
But
to
I'd go a
collectively,
bet.
across the globe, change the mindset to either support it or say, let's do basic properly and get back to our roots. But
I would go a bet that those scholars having success with the SSD would also have success with working the basic and mainstream program, because that is exactly what they're doing. They're using the mainstream basic calls.
Surprisingly,
there's nothing wrong
not
with
all
it.
of them.
Right.
Surprisingly, not all of them. But that said, there's two places where it's really having success, and one Daryl mentioned, which is where there is the only program in the area, and they're working in isolation, and they can do it at their own pace, and they take 15 weeks or whatever, but that's their only program. And the other one is what Larry was saying earlier. They've got a lot of clubs in that area that are doing exactly the same thing. They're getting together and they're mutually supportive of each other. That's where it's success. But those are isolated pockets.
I have a question.
I've got to agree with Michael. When I've been in Europe, I have been so impressed with their major events like conventions, national conventions, Swedish conventions, European conventions. They always have at least one hall where there is basic dancing, and it's interesting basic dancing. And sometimes they'll have two halls going where there's basic. They call it, I think it's fast basics and just normal basics. The normal basics is for the people that are less experienced, and the fast basics is for the mainstream plus and advanced dancers who are wanting to do the basic program and do it in an interesting way. There is so much that you can do within the basic program if you just think about it.
Yep.
But there's one trap in there, and that is where we have to be aware, because sometimes scholars, they bring to the entry level, to the beginners, the sophisticated basic material, which I would use in plus and higher. And there we got to be careful, because anyone who likes more brain work and more sophisticated dancing can go up in all the levels. I like to call up to C as well. But if we take that away from those in the entry level, we will lose them. They've got nothing but that level.
The only reason we would lose them
should be
is
the
because we're
foundation
not giving
of
them
our
the product
activity.
that they want.
Right.
And that's consistently. Jeff, I've got you, and then John had a question, but I think John is ducked out of it, so we'll go Jeff and then Betsy. You had a comment. So starting with Jeff.
Yeah. Well, in Australia, I do not know of an SSD club. We haven't got any clubs that do SSD. They use it as a stepping stone to get to mainstream.
Yep.
And so really, SSD has not taken on. It's used as a stepping stone, as I said. It's also, as Brian mentioned, it's going to give problems for our national and state conventions in programming. We don't have multiple halls. We're lucky if we got two halls. And you're not going to program these people, so they're not going, if there are any, they're not going to be able to go to those functions.
Yeah, unless we drop the mainstream program.
Yeah, well, you won't get too many people to attend, will you?
No. But this is the reality, and like I said, this is why it was both a pro and a con.
Yeah.
And it
Australia, I don't know if anyone
yeah.
else knows of a club
I think
that dances
Glenn
it here.
was trying it, and Jeff was doing the same thing. But what they're doing exactly what you say. They're doing the SSD program to reinvigorate and to get it restarted
That's
again,
right.
so that they get back to dance. Well, that's not SSD. That's just shortcutting to mainstream.
Correct.
And then having to go back and reteach mainstream. And that adds to what Michael was saying as well, that unless we're consistent as callers and we do the thing properly and we do it right, it's not going to work. If we want to lose mainstream and call it SSD and then move the rest of the program up to plus, fine, let's do that. Make that decision, but somebody's got to make that decision. And until we can get everybody to collectively change their mindset, and that's the dancers, that's the old guard, if you will, and callers that have to learn how to change their mind and be flexible, it's not going to work. And I want to make it very, very clear. I am not a supporter of the SSD program, and I'm not an opposer of the SSD program. I looked at this whole thing objectively. I don't have the right to say I support it or not support it because I am not teaching a class right now and I'm not in position to do that. But I can provide an objective analysis of this, and this is why I hold these sessions. So somebody put in the comment, is David Todd teaching SSD? I know David had mentioned it, and he sent me a couple things on the SSD. He wanted to be here. I think he was in a little bit earlier, but I don't know if he's actually doing that right now or if he's doing the same thing. Betsy, you had a comment.
Yeah, you kept mentioning Larry and the 11 clubs. What area are we talking about there?
That's Larry Marquez.
Yeah.
And
Colorado.
And what was the my next question is what was the majority of the clubs in the area? What program were they dancing prior to this?
As I understand it, there was a couple of mainstream and mainly plus, but I could be wrong. I didn't get a chance to get into full discussion. But what they were doing was they collectively got together and decided they were going to do SSD. They were going to drop the mainstream, and then all the rest of that stuff that would go into when they want to progress. That's going to be what they do. They're going to collectively support SSD and try it out for a while, and then their plus groups are going to incorporate the rest of the mainstream and the plus. If that works for them, I actually hope that they stick to it and it does work, because that will be a sound test platform across a variety of areas and clubs to see if maybe that is the way to go. I don't know. That's along the line of what Mickey was saying. If we're going to do that, it's got to be collective, it's got to be consistent, and if whatever we call it, it doesn't matter as long as we're all doing the same thing collectively. And until we get that data, we don't know.
I believe that's what's happening, similar to what's happening with Jeremy Butler and the Chicago area, and it's what Southern California is planning to do post-pandemic. The whole the big association of the LA area and the surrounding counties are all switching to SSD for 2 years to see if they can revitalize things that way.
Yeah.
But again, same thing. It's an area where plus clubs were the predominant.
Yeah. My personal opinion on this is the powers that be in Collar Lab should have made the very unpopular political decision and said, okay, the new basic and mainstream program is now the SSD program. Here it is.
Yeah.
Everything that's not there is now, this is the new plus program. This is this, and this is how this works. And then you've got that bridge. When you start learning it, you dance SSD in the extended applications for a year, and then you go to plus. If you want to, you don't have to.
Easy, yeah.
That should have been done. That would have been a very unpopular decision, but and it's just my opinion. For it to fundamentally work objectively, it's right. You can't say you can only choose two things and put one thing on the table.
Okay.
And collectively, you can't say choose one, that's going to be the standard, but we're going to keep all five anyway.
There's just probably no way that would have passed the general vote. So
no. Like I said,
that's why we have to deal with it as a transition thing. We have to deal with putting them side by side, and
and that's the problem, is it's still being looked at as a transition, and it's a big complaint, but nobody wants to get behind. Well, I shouldn't say nobody. The general consensus is there's tentative support for the idea as long as I don't have to change.
Mel?
Yes, Bob.
Okay. This was before SSD, back in the early 1980s, last century. I had a club, and I will say the one advantage is I was able to do this on multiple nights. And we would teach a class and get halfway through mainstream and start another class on another night.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the people who were struggling could go to the second night or do whatever, and the people that... Anyway, the results of me doing this, and that was I think up to 3 classes a year I did. The club went from 2 squares to 403 members. How many squares is that? No, 436. 436 members. But yeah, so that's, and that's spanned over 3 nights. And you know what the biggest night was? The mainstream group, because We never graduated a person and said, you're going to plus. I just did your thing of featuring different plus calls during the night till I went all through the list and started over again. And I never repeated that call 2 weeks in a row. And eventually, the really, what you might call good or the puzzle type dancers, they would say, when can I start doing this plus? I think I know all the calls. And my answer was, come over next week. And then they would show up on the plus night. I would accommodate them. They would blend into the club. And after about 4 or 5 weeks, they would tell some of the other members that you might like to come too. And it repeated, and it just worked well. But the biggest group was the mainstream group. It was doubled the size of the.
That's why it used to be called the mainstream of dancing. Holly, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think with the club that I'm calling for, their idea was to do the SSD program for probably 2 years. And this is Kip Garvey is kind of behind the group on Wednesday night because he has the plus group. And he said he would be willing to fill in those mainstream, those 13 and a half, 14 calls with that group if they have gone through the SSD program long enough. And so I'm hoping that he can convince, because I'm going to talk to him and say, if he can convince the club not to try to rush it. And so
if you've got that resource, definitely have Kip talk to them.
You want me to talk to Kip for you?
Well, I'll talk to him because I'll see him, but I'm just worried that the club's trying to get him.
You muted yourself, Holly.
I was just I'm thinking they want to rush them through, and that's not the intent of SSD.
No.
Yeah. Well, when you go, make sure you both you and Kip go together because Kip's still relatively new and he might need your support.
Sure. Read your chat, Holly.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. No, Kip would definitely be an asset, and I like what he says in that he's more than willing to teach them the rest of the mainstream with his plus group as part of learning that once they've danced SSD for a while and they can do it, which means that they've got to have been introduced to the SAV and the extended applications after graduation, after they finish the program. That's an imperative that has to go into that. Mickey, did you have I saw your hand flash. I didn't know if it was up or you were just taking your hand down.
I'm safe.
Oh, I saw the hand there.
Oh.
Yolanda, you're very, very quiet. Are you looking at doing SSD in your area?
I haven't quite decided. I want to work on my skills a little bit before I do anything, and I'm in over my head. But it is something to consider.
Well, I have thrown an awful lot of material out of there. Some of it was controversial. Some of it is definitely pointed, and there's a lot of fingers and finger pointing and blame directed at callers in general, not any specific caller. I include myself in the number because I was part of the problem that created these conditions, whether knowingly or unknowingly. I went along with, I was paid to do a job. I did the job I was paid for a long time before I got the moxie to say, no, this is what needs to be done, to stand back and look at it. But Mickey put it very, very succinctly, and he's absolutely correct. Unless we are consistent across the board, across the globe, and everybody gets behind the program and recognizes it for what it is and uses it for what it is, it will not work. And SSD is competition to the other programs. I don't care what anybody says. It is a standalone program, but it is competition to the basic program. It is competition to the mainstream program. It is competition to the plus program. It doesn't require any changes to any programs, of course not, because they're using the same material. But it is a Color Lab program, and it deserves a recognition as a Color Lab program. Whether or not it's the right choice or the right action, I don't know. Time is going to tell. But until we have a long period of teaching and a long period of using that stands alone, used properly, we're not going to know. And my biggest fear is we're going to have SSD dividing square dancing, and we're all going to get too old, and then you get all the young ones like Holly and Yolanda there are going to be sitting there saying, where did all those callers go? What do we do now? We're the only two left because everybody else is too old and died off, and all our dancers are gone with us.
Already the callers are disappearing.
Yep.
It's an interesting analogy with health, that it's basically you're talking about diets. That all of the individual calls are all the same. It's just how you're arranging the diets. And so if you want the health of the activity, you've got to think about getting the right diet. And SSD has tried, and but I think Mickey's point is very valid, that really they haven't shifted it much from the basic program anyway. And now we've got two competing diets that really are almost the same.
Yep. Make the decision. It's unpopular, but if you want it to work, let's be real brusque about it. Square dancing as it is right now, with the basic and mainstream program, the collective rush to plus, the inconsistency in what we do, is a wounded limb that's got gangrene. And if we want the body to survive, we've got to cut it off and start afresh. There's artificial limbs, and we can live a full, normal, and healthy life and grow the activity. But we can't do it if we're trying to say, right, I'm going to put on a new arm, but I'm not going to cut off the one that needs to be removed. And we either fix it or we change it.
And I think we have to be honest.
Yep.
Because those rushing the dancers through the plus program, we got to ask them what's going to happen if we have an entry level in some areas like SSD. Are they going to keep their feet still, or are they going to grab the dancers? I mean, we had discussion about SSD dancers saying we're going to, knock them out the town if they come and get our dancers, but it will only take one couple in a SSD group to start the avalanche.
Absolutely.
Go downhill.
And the only way that you're going to stop that is back to the marketing. You've got to give them a product that they want to keep, that they want to have, that they want to use. And if you can't deliver that product, they'll get a taste for square dance and go to where they can find that product. And I'm absolutely serious about this. There are a lot of new callers out there that are looking to start SSD. There's a lot of experienced callers that are looking to start SSD. But their calling background, their format, their foundation of calling skills is not strong enough to sell this program as a marketable idea that is different than the basic and mainstream program. And that is unfortunately where it's going to fail. And I know that's a very unpopular and a very controversial statement, but unfortunately we are our own worst enemies by selling a bad product, and that bad product is our presentation of our own activity. Until we make ourselves put out there something that they want to buy and they want to come to, and that's the whole package. That's not just us singing and calling. That's the whole package of welcome to the hall. I'm looking forward to meeting people. I'm looking forward to socializing. It's just fun to be with you. Mike Turner, you can't sing a song, you can't hold a tune in a bucket, but man, I love coming to your dances. That kind, until we can sell the product that way, it's not going to work.
One of the reasons that the SSD, I'm getting some feedback for some reason, SSD and then plus breakdown versus basic and then mainstream will be advantageous is that it's a much bigger gap, and it's more of a learning commitment than the people who learned SSD in the first place had to go through. So even though there may be some enticement and some pull for peer pressure to go to the plus, if they look at that and say, oh, I can keep dancing this dance that I've had fun at, or I can commit to this whole long class, only the people that really enjoy learning are going to go on to the class.
Yep.
And
that'll
I don't buy that because we had the discussion.
Yes, that will work, but that will only work if you get rid of that intermediary crossover of the basic and the mainstream programs.
But it doesn't have to be Color Lab. A region that commits to this approach of SSD and plus can achieve that.
Yeah, but I don't buy that because we had the discussion when we were in 2000 with a Target 2000. And there was one thing of shortening the mainstream down to 50 and have the rest put up to plus, which is pretty much what we're talking about right now.
Yeah.
But at that time, we had two stops. We had the basic stop, the mainstream stop, going into plus. If the callers did not use the two stops, why should they use that one stop?
Yep. And that's what it boils down to when I put that slide up. The reason this will work or will not work is the callers. That's it.
Right.
Yes, Betsy.
Going back to T2000, one of the reasons that I was not comfortable with it because I did not believe in the United States that people would follow it and create clubs. I truly, if they wouldn't do it with the basic program, then how are they going to do it with the T2000?
Okay, Betsy.
And that could be happening now again, but I have my fingers crossed.
What could happen and probably will, if they're very successful in Colorado as a group, and Southern California, there's a whole group that are all the clubs have agreed to go to SSD. If those places invoke it and it works and they're successful, their clubs are going to mushroom in sizes. And as people see their success, they'll get drawn to it.
The other thing that's hopeful, and Bob is helping in this, is that that's different from past attempts, is that we now have enough momentum that there are a lot of resources to help make this succeed. The detailed lesson plan with choreography in SSD, the Cedar.net breaking choreography down by SSD, Bob and other music producers now coming out with SSD material on their recordings and so forth, as well as festivals that step forward and offer SSD level dancing. These will all are necessary and will help to make some difficult task more possible.
Yes. Hang on, where are we?
Yeah, Mel, you had one point you made up at the beginning with the social square dance, that everything we do in every program is social. And by pronouncing it, it makes it a little bit kind of shaky and icky. I used to do some magic times ago. And one thing which was really killing the thing, if you said, here is a normal deck of cards. Of course it is a normal deck, but why would you put so much emphasis in it? And this would, make the people think. And this is the same thing I think would happen. I think this is a good point you made. Yeah,
when you say this is a normal deck of cards, and it is a normal deck of cards, you're doing that intentionally to distract from the fact of I'm going to be doing something else. Pay attention to these cards, not to what I'm doing.
No, everybody expects if you do a trick or whatever, it should be a regular deck of cards if you can do magic, But if
and the essence of social square dancing, like they changed the name from sustainable square dancing because the essence, we need something that is going to last. We need something that can do this. We can do, and we talked about the history in brief. Yes, part of its origins is from the snowbird community. 12 to 15 weeks of people coming down to the southern states to get warm, to escape Canada and escape the northern climes, to have warm place, and they wanted an activity that they could share that would be consistent no matter what they went to. And there was a lot of iterations getting to this, but there's so much more to it. And it wasn't designed to be a feeder program. It wasn't designed to be a longevity thing. It wasn't designed to say we're going to do this inside, outside, upside down, and backwards. It did morph into all of those things. And when I said SSD is not for handy-capable square dancing. It's not for teaching old folks. It's not for something to do in the retirement village. It's not for something to teach in kindergarten or schools. It's not a school program. It is all of those things, just as basic and mainstream was, just as an open dance thing was. It's everything that the basic program or the mainstream program was. What makes it work and be available for that is the callers. And if you're willing to put the work in and make that happen, it's got to be attractive to all ages, to all levels of fitness, to all activities. We as callers have to stop saying, I'm going to start a new club because it's in the old folks' home. Guess what, guys? Our music is old. But you know, these old folks, they want their music. That's AC/DC, that's heavy metal, that's acid rock, because that's now 60 years old. That's what we're talking about here. And I still don't see a lot of square dance records that are heavy metal and acid rock. But that's what a lot of these people in the old folks. I was up at one of the retirement homes here, and guess what? Cold Chisel and AC/DC and everything. That's what the old folks are listening to, is their comfort music.
I don't think we're necessarily supposed to advertise it to our potential new customers as social square dancing. I thought the idea is we're just supposed to call it square dancing.
Yep, that's why I put that in the marketing thing.
If you say social square dancing,
or
that sort of
modern
begs
square
the
dancing.
question. It's like, yeah, or something. But
because
yeah.
is there anti-social and not fun square dancing?
Right. And
it's called challenge.
Oh yeah, that was the answer to your question that I forgot. We were talking in Dawn's session this morning about hand positions and ocean waves and forearm grips and hand grips, and there is a regional difference for challenge dancing for the program, and that is hands out, head down, frown on face, looking at the floor. And that's the position for all calls in challenge.
Nobody goes to a challenge square dance because
Penguin
they
dance.
miserable. They invest huge amounts of time workshopping, several nights a week and studying on the weekends. And they don't do that because it's not fun. And
I know that. I just laugh because
they think that's fun and they're being social, and they are.
It reminded me of when I was at the convention in Ottawa, and I had the duty of escorting the television crew around and showing them that, and they just happened to stop at the challenge hall, and that's what it was robotic machinery moving around in the floor, and it was deadly quiet. The caller was going, and then at the end of it, everybody was there. There was this great cheer, but if you watched it and didn't stay for that cheer at the end, it didn't look like they were having fun, and they were all having a ball because that's what they were after. It's a whole different concept, but we always like to make fun of challenge dancers because that's what they have in Germany. Is they have the basic hall, and then they've got the basic fast hall, and that's mainly for challenge dancers because they want a real challenge. They have to come down to the basic hall because that's where the challenge is. They don't know how to do it.
I got to tell you a little story, please.
I'm just picking on you, Chris.
Yeah, it's really not true.
I know.
And so I just have to tell you that challenge dancers don't find these characterizations to be humorous one little bit.
No,
they take it seriously.
I know that, and that's why I always qualify those with this is a tongue-in-cheek comment beforehand. The same as I said, common sense and logic, as a rule in the States. That's a tongue-in-cheek comment because it applies everywhere. I've got Brian, and then I've got Bob.
I think Bob was first.
Oh, okay. I've got Bob, and then I got Brian.
I taught kids for 10 years, and it was third and fourth graders. And at the end of the school year, they danced. They filled the whole playground in the back. It's probably about 30 squares. And one day during their class, when I was teaching, one of the kids came up to me and said, "Mr. Elling, we went on to YouTube and watched square dancing. Why didn't you tell us that zombies square danced?" Because they had watched a challenge program.
Yeah, and it's real. Challenge dancing is for challenge dancers a very fun, and very entertaining, and a very intriguing program. I love watching it, even though I don't understand it and I don't dance it. I have no problem with challenge dancing whatsoever. But what I was saying was from a marketing standpoint, we do that. That's the same bad advertising as getting people in their 80s and 90s in frou-frous and lampshades with a caller singing Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball, standing in a mall with bad acoustics at the bottom of the escalator doing a square dance demonstration to recruit. It's just a bad marketing ploy.
Well, I don't know if you want to see some marketing type videos or things that would be suitable for attracting people to square dancing in general. I can give you 2 or 3 really good YouTube videos of various high level and C4 dances and whatever.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I think it'd be nothing at all like what you're describing.
I agree, and it is a generalized stereotype. Yes, Brian.
First of all, before I say this, I must apologize to Chris because he's probably not going to like this very much.
That's nothing new. Just go for it.
I was attending a national convention in Europe. I won't say where it was or who it was I was speaking to about this, but I was going around the various halls having a look, and I think it was Bronk Wise was running a challenge session in one of the halls. And I said to one of the people I was with, I think I'm going to go over and have a look in the C2 hall. And they said, oh, you're going to go over where the sea monsters are.
Oh, I like that. I think that's a good name for a club.
The sea monsters.
That's it.
I like it.
Well, I'm pleased it didn't offend you, Chris.
Okay, I'm gonna stick my 2 cents worth in, and I believe that if you look at people who are new to a program, be it SSD, be it basic, be it mainstream, be it plus, be it advanced, be any of the challenge programs, if they're brand new and they're thinking really hard, they will have their heads down because it helps a lot of people to recall, and they will not be smiling. If you look at people who have danced the programs for years, they'll be hamming it up. I had friends who went to the National Challenge Convention in Virginia Beach years ago, and they went to watch I think it was the C3 room, and they were like, wow, they've got some great noises that they make for the calls. And I never knew that challenge dancers had fun.
Yep.
So it's all in how comfortable the people are at what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Actually, when I was first learning, I learned everything in a very short period of time. So when I say when I was first learning challenge, it's also when I was just first learning, because it's very compressed. But I remember going to the New England Convention and going to the C1 hall there to dance. And of course, I was new at that level, and I was so hard, and I'm thinking really hard and everything. And a couple of one particular couple, Chuck and Betsy Berry, walked in there. They're not from the area, but they came to the convention, and they were in there, very accomplished C4 dancers for many years. And they came in there, and they were in my square. I couldn't believe how casual and relaxed they were at doing the material, and they were goofing around and doing all kinds of little things in there, and it made a huge impression on me. But I'm saying, even as somebody who was learning the level at the time, what Betsy's saying is absolutely right, and I was really it made a big impression on me when I came up for air. Because these people were in the square, and they were just, so friendly and just having a blast.
Yeah, I will not argue with it, because I remember what I was like my first dance that I went to in Germany, my first mainstream dance. I was absolutely terrified, and my head was down, and I was concentrating real hard as well. And you're absolutely correct, but it's still fun to pick on you, Chris.
And one thing about the music I would like to say, with the AC/DC and the hard rock type thing, why we don't have them in square dancing, we would have to rearrange the timing lists.
Yep.
Because once in a while they would be standing there for headbanging. Yeah. which is a vital part of their action.
Do I bang my head for 6 beats or 8 beats? I don't know. The reality is the music and everything else really has nothing to do with it. if we want to sell this product, whatever the final outcome, whether it's a modified mainstream program or a modified entry program or SSD or whatever it is,
let's call it square dance.
The thing that is going to sell is a product that is worth buying. And until we can have a product that's worth buying everywhere, it's not going to work.
Yeah, but I disagree when you say things like that has nothing to do with the music. It has to do with all of it. Is the thing.
Oh yeah, no, that's what I'm talking about. The product itself.
The thing we need.
We cannot focus on.
Not any one thing.
That's what I'm saying. We can't focus on the fact that lampshades and frou-frous. Well, why do women wear the crinoline and whatnot? And that's tradition. No, it's not. It's there because in the 50s, no self-respecting woman would be seen going to dance unless they were in a hoop skirt and bobby socks rather than pants or a long dress, because that's for old folks. So we changed and accommodated, but we never changed and accommodated back. But clothing is not the reason why people don't go dancing. The music is not the reason. The songs, the choreography. The reason is we're not giving them a whole product experience. And that's what we have to learn to do as callers, is sell an experience, not sell choreography or clothes or music. Sell an experience of fun sociability that you want to repeat and do over and over and over again. Even though there's changes, it's the same feeling of, wow, I had a good time.
I didn't understand Kurt all the way. Your point.
My point is the way we're teaching, the way we've done it, other caller mistakes that Mel's been talking about are certainly part of the problem, but the music is part of the problem, and the clothing, at least as a required thing, is part of the problem. I mean, there's some people that enjoy the clothing. That's fine too. It's just and it's hard because anytime we focus on one particular part of the problem, of the general problem of why is square dancing not recruiting and retaining as many people as it used to, people get focused on one aspect of it. I just want to make sure that everybody keeps in mind that there's a whole spectrum of issues, and some of it is clearly external to our control, the very definite changes in lifestyle and people's competition for time and work versus recreation divisions and so on. And we just have to do what we can to try to address all of those things as much as we can. And we're never going to succeed unless we're at least addressing 2/3 of the problems. If we can put all the effort we want to into SSD, and by itself, it's not going to help solve.
I absolutely agree with you, Kurt.
Yeah.
And one of the things is it's very easy to try and find something to blame and then get hyper focused on it. We start, what's the problem? Oh, clothing. And we put everything aside to talk about clothing, and we forget everything else because clothing's not a problem.
But that's one of the reasons
it is a problem. It's a small part of a bigger problem holistically that we don't look at.
But that's one of the reasons I really like what has been done up to this point with the SSD program and is continually evolving, is unlike anything else that we've seen before, at least out of Color Lab, it is addressing a more comprehensive set of the issues, because it's not just the list, it's not just the teaching time, it's not just the lessons, it's about the approaches of repeat classes, and it's about a focus on socializing the people as you bring them in, and many other aspects are kind of all rolled into this. And that's why, even though, yes, as Mickey said, you can take all that same kind of focus and apply it to any other list, be it basic, be it whatever else. But the fact is that focus is being applied right now to SSD. And that's why I switched from what list I was using to SSD, because this is the one that has momentum right now. And let's all push on that ball. And if we push on that ball and get it together, then that can become the new solution.
Brian,
I have a real question. You just said this, and people keep saying it, talking about we're going to focus on the social aspect and whatever, and the socializing and whatever. I'm not sure what they mean, because I've never been to a club that doesn't focus on those things.
I have.
Yeah, I have.
Maybe I'm just lucky, but I mean, all the clubs that I call for, and anytime I visit a club, they're always very interested in taking care of their beginners and socializing with them right away when they come in the door. And if people, random visitors drop by who don't even know what's squared in, they heard the noise coming out of the room and they come in there. Everybody's very accommodating and real nice. So I'm not sure.
Like I said, it's not individuals, but there is a generalization towards that.
I've never seen
there are, and I've been to some very large clubs, which are, in my opinion, very elitist and very snobbish. I've been to dances where they've turned dancers away, singles. You got 4 or 5 singles coming to a dance because they're not coming as couples, even though if they paired up, they would be couples.
I haven't heard of anything like that for 40 years.
That still happens in some places. There are couples only clubs. There are square dance attire required clubs. A lot of that is disappearing, thank God, because they found out that people don't want to come and socialize with anymore. But there are a lot of those things, and there's a lot of clubs where you go, you dance, you have your requisite coffee break, and at the end of the dance you put your coat on, you go home, and you don't even know where half your dancers live. That's just the reality of what happens and what has been happening in a lot of places. But it's not everywhere, but it is becoming more prevalent. Brian Hotchkiss posted in the chat there, says, why can't do we need something like SSD? Why can't we just concentrate on basic and mainstream that we already have and make them work properly? Excellent question, but the reason is we've had basic and mainstream. We've been concentrating on trying to get it to work properly for the last 30 years. Yeah. We haven't been able to do it because we do not work together. We work in opposition and contrast to each other. This is an idea that was put out there to say, okay, it may not be the answer, but at least it's an attempt to try and fix something and get people focused on it. And if everybody, Jerry even said that if everybody wants to go back to doing basic and mainstream, but if they all did it properly and they all did it together and they all did it the same and they did it properly, it would work. The reality is it's not working the way we're doing it. It works great for some, and some people are masters at it, but it's not working collectively as a whole for everybody. And you can see that not just in the difference between Europe and the States or Australia and New Zealand and Japan. You can see that from West 51st Street to East 51st Street in some cities. I don't know if there is a West, but there's that kind of marked difference between clubs and how the approaches go. And it's so inconsistent and it's so competitive and it's so isolated and focused on we're better than you that it hasn't worked for that long. We need to fix it, or we need to decide.
Mel?
Yes, Bob.
The reason it never worked, because for the majority of clubs in the U.S. anyway, mainstream has never been, or for many years, a destination program. It was a stepping stone to plus. That's all it's been. And for that reason, it hasn't worked. Yep. It worked for me in the 80s. It can work. And it's not that much longer to teach.
No, it's not. And it is, like I said, it was easier for callers, rather than to use the basic and mainstream program, to start doing plus, because relay the Ducey and spin chain and exchange the gears added novelty, excitement, and flow that you didn't have to think about. Alan?
I wanted to raise the issue of certainly cities, the contraction means that people move back to less clubs. But areas where you only have one club and the difficulty in getting beginners, we're not really addressing how do you do it on a micro scale if you're only ever getting 1 or 2 couples for each intake. Do we have callers who are prepared to commit the time to see at least 2 couples through some activity, whether it's SSD or whatever, so that they can add to the existing club so it doesn't decline as fast as it's declining?
I'd like to answer that one directly, because really, I'm in that position.
Just a moment, Mel. That's really the main issue that most Australian clubs are facing who don't exist in a city, where the cities are relying on the collapse of other clubs, keeping 1 or 2 clubs afloat. The issue now for the country clubs or the clubs that are in smaller cities is how do we keep a single club alive? And it's really are we prepared to do the micro? Somebody commit their time to teach two couples or one couple even how to dance so that you slowly arrest the problem.
There are a number of clubs that only have one student, and they'll still run a student class, albeit a modified student class, but they do that, and they run a formal class for their one student. And that takes a lot, and that's a lot of dedication from the club. Addressing what you were saying, though, I'm in one of those areas. I have not called to a club. I have not had a club since I moved here to Australia. I'm in a very unusual place in Australia where we have Canberra is the capital city of the country, and we have more sports clubs, groups, and organizations than are in the city of Canberra. And we have a population of 15,000 in my entire shire. My shire is about the size of Delaware. And that goes to tell you what we're looking at. Now, I can do open dances, do 3 or 4 of those in a year, a fun dance, a party night, that kind of stuff. But getting people to commit, because most families, if you've got kids, you are in 4 different groups and organizations, you're on the board, you're on this, all of that. And quite frankly, I cannot present a program. I know I'm a good caller. I know I can present and entertaining, but I cannot present a product that's going to break that market of cliqueism and chain. Alan's club has come up here. They came up to dance for a while, and that created a lot of interest when we had, what is this square dancing stuff? And it was just for a visit, and that they've had a standing officer to come and do demonstrations. Demonstrations won't help here. And that's the same problem a lot of people have everywhere in the States, in Canada, here in Australia. And when you talk about small rural clubs, I went up to a couple of these places when I was traveling in my job, and there's clubs listed in the advertising list that have folded 3 or 4 years ago. They're still on it, on the dancing list, but that club is folded, and it's getting more and more and more prevalent because what's the product? I'm a firm believer that if the product, once they're introduced to it, square dancing should be like crack cocaine. Try it once and you're hooked. Unfortunately, we can't develop that product into being crack cocaine, if you will. We've got the potential of doing it.
It is for some people, and and that's the group that is here. Yeah. But that's the idea, is to try to find something that's
we need to make
people that aren't quite in
product.
That same.
Yeah.
I guess that means for the callers, it's like LSD. You take one dose and then you're considered legally insane.
Yeah.
Well, we have to somehow teach callers to have fun.
Yeah.
Doing it. And I don't, I see so many of the newer callers, their idea of fun is learning to call the plus calls. Yep. Or in this area, I've seen a lot of the callers, you think that a caller would start, he'd learn to do a bass. No, a lot of the callers are challenge dancers who've decided to become callers. First they call challenge, and then they work their way down the level.
Yeah.
And he's very, very good. And that's kind of what happened to Barry Clasper.
Yeah, but Barry is an anomaly in that, because I know a number of challenge callers that they put themselves out there. They market. They've got a good singing voice. They do their calling. They've got a good pattern delivery of the material that they borrow or research, and they get hired to do dances, but they cannot carry a mainstream floor, and they can barely carry a plus floor. Barry is an anomaly in this. I believe Barry, he went that way, but Barry actually said, okay, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this properly. And he went back and he took introduction to calling workshops, and he took basic new callers, caller schools, and he went through that process of saying, if I'm going to call at this level, I'm going to get all those foundation activities and fundamentals that I need to do this.
Yes.
A lot of callers don't.
I remember when he said, I want to learn to call mainstream.
Yep. I wasn't kidding. It was one of the comments that was made at one of the European dancers, one of the European dances, that they had a big dance. They had a big name callers hired to come in and do it. And then they had to, at the last minute, get a couple of the local callers to come in and do the mainstream all, because the big name callers, or the basic call, I should say, because the big name callers could not call a basic dance. They did not know what was on the basic program or how to call a basic dance. it's not unusual, and it's not a blame, but well, it is a blame really, because I'm a believer that if you call plus, you should be able to call a basic dance, you should be able to call a mainstream dance, you should be able to call a plus dance. If you dance plus, you should be able to dance basic, you should be able to dance mainstream, you should be able to dance plus at the standard application level that is expected to be able to go anywhere in the world and dance the listed program with standard applications. That's just my belief. But I live in a dream world.
But I also believe that you should be able to call a basic dance and a basic dance that challenges everybody.
Yes.
As well as a mainstream dance and a mainstream dance that you could call to almost beginners. So, the caller really need to widen their capabilities. That's what it comes down to.
And and I would add to that, Alan, and I agree wholeheartedly, the ability to have judgment, to understand the difference between different and difficult. Variety and innovation does not have to be difficult. It just has to be interesting, and it can be interesting and creative without being excessively difficult or technical. And that's where we've lost a lot of focus.
In the past, Color Lab had some sessions that were supposed to be different, not difficult. Some of them were, and some of them were holy mackerel off the wall.
Yep.
I believe that.
I'm sure you can listen to the recordings of them.
Someone asked me once what level I preferred calling, where did I have the most fun? And
For me, it's mainstream.
I've called from newer dancers, one night stands to C3A. And my answer was any level where they're excited about learning. That's just my feeling on it. I love teaching. I love having people improve their dancing. And when people want to learn, that's where I have my most fun.
As do I, Bob, but I would have to actually say mainstream is where I love to call.
Well, you can say that.
Yeah.
I think I have the most fun at the two extremes. I have a tremendous amount of fun doing one night stand type dances, parties and things, and then at the same time I'll turn around and call a C3B dance, so really hard stuff, and I have a great. It's different kinds of fun.
Exactly.
But I mean I love the whole spectrum. But I have a great fondness for one night stands and for beginners, and I love teaching, the beginner levels and stuff. And
Well, I'd have to say I'd be hard pressed to pick. Because I regularly call kind of everything from beginner classes up through C1. I currently am not calling as often, but I still do it, and I enjoy them all. But they all feel different. It's a different experiences.
Yes.
But I want to go back to the point about just with enjoying with people learning. That is one of the things we have to be careful with in implementing the SSD program. The key idea of the SSD approach, beyond just the list, is that there is a class, potentially a much bigger class of potential dancers who don't really get into the learning very much. They want to learn a little bit in order to get into this social dance experience. But then once they've done that, they just want to dance. They want to continue to socialize and come once in a while, not necessarily every week. And that's supposed to be the main target for the SSD audience. And so in that case, you don't want to be making them learn something every week, right? You want to find ways to give them some variety of dancing, and still, but not too much, and just mostly let them the chance to dance. Now, the problem on the other hand is that some people that have been pushing for the SSD program, and you pointed out, Mel, some of the ways this policy statement was phrased, and went to this extreme, which is, while that's the main target for this, there will be dancers that are on the other end who do like to learn, who do enjoy the challenge, and we don't want to also put them off. If you do nothing but say SSD is the entire world, make it illegal for anybody to mention plus or anything like that in your hall, and you are going to lose some portion of people who are on the other end of the spectrum.
Yep.
So the challenging part is to find some way to balance and have two paths and two forks, and not push people who don't belong in one fork into the other fork.
Yeah.
Okay, when I say like to learn, I'm not trying to educate them to a new level. It's featuring something different during the night that they learned for that night. Once upon a time, God, I can't remember when it was. I had a group in Oakland called the Oakland Hoedowners, and it was basically from a one night stand that I did at a school, and all these parents wanted to get together and dance. And we started a club, and I went up, then I went through basic, mainstream, and I went into plus. And then one night they approached me and said, "We don't want to be plus dancers, but we want to be mainstream. And we know that you do up to the challenge level. And if you want to show us one call every week, that's fine. But don't expect us to know it the next week." And that was told to me by dancers in the 80s. And that's what happened. And that club lasted for several years until these little kids became high school students, and the parents got more active in what they were doing, didn't have the time. But it was a close-knit group, and it was a lot of fun working with them.
I totally agree with both with what Bob and Kurt are both saying there. And if I have a complaint about SSD, it's that it's too much, and I would actually prefer something that's even a lower level and much more of a after you've had the lessons, casual drop in, even shorter than 12 weeks, and much more reduced from that, and have that be a first class thing, and at the same time make people aware that if you like this, if you like the lessons and the learning things and whatever, there's more, and you could be going to some of these other groups and doing that stuff too. But to get the most number of people pumped in, so that you'll get those people, the real puzzle people, the ones who want to be pros and who want to make a time commitment and who are looking for that kind of a thing. In order to find those people, you probably want to get in the larger number of people. It's always a pyramid, filtering type thing for those group of people. But square dancing can't survive unless there's a large number of people, or any activity, unless there's a large number of new people coming by and checking it out, and hanging out, and maybe doing it, So
the pyramid is a really good description, because right now we're in an inverted pyramid, and we're going to topple very quickly.
Yeah, but
the advantage to the pyramid being inverted and toppling, when a pyramid topples, it then suddenly has a big base. So that's the only advantage of it, and hopefully we can topple into a big base. And like I said in the presentation, I'm not supporting SSD. I'm not opposed to SSD. It is a proposal. It is fraught with danger. It has some really good points. Some of those good points are the same as some of the bad points. It's a two-edged sword. Like most coins and most things, they have two sides to it. But without those two sides, it doesn't have any value. Is it the answer? I don't know.
I don't think we can screw things up any more than they already are, and so but Kurt, so we'll try it.
We're talking SSD. That's a C1 movement. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it is now just past the top of the hour. We've been on for 3 hours. I've been here since 11:30, so 12 and a half hours. By all means, I encourage you to keep the discussion going if you want to, but I'm going to have to duck away. I can leave the room open if you want to carry on the discussion. Please feel free, or if nobody has more to add, by all means, thank you very much for coming. Thanks for sticking around.
Thank you.
All of this material, the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, the notes, everything else is going to be available on the OC Callers website. The sustainable square dancing, the social square dancing, the standard applications, the definitions, and all that are all available on the Caller Lab websites. I just caution people, when you do Google There's a lot of information out there. If you Google the Color Lab website and you're looking for the ARC, for instance, you're going to get the stuff from 2015. You're going to get the stuff from 2017. Always make sure you've got the latest information available, because they do change and they do update from time to time. And as always, if you have any questions for me, just flick me an email.
Okay. I'm going to go visit my wife. Bye.
Me too.
Take care. Is anybody sticking around, or you guys had enough?
I've had enough. I think I'm going to head off. So
okay.
Thanks, Mel. Catch you later, guys.
Take care, everybody. Thanks for coming in.
Bye.
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 Bye. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you, Mel.